explain the dollars.
Chair, again, the item was pulled. There was a technical glitch that didn't pull it completely, and I know that staff has worked very diligently in order to get information back. I know that Susan Millay has some additional information she would like to share.
Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to the item appearing twice, there was a problem with the system, and so we are working with the vendor to try and remove it. It's an anomaly that the second one needs to be removed and hasn't been able to be removed, and we're working with the vendor in the application. So sorry for that inconvenience.
But the amount and everything is the same in both?
Correct. So as it was going through the process, there was a hiccup with it, and so it was submitted a second time so that it could continue on. So the first request that you're seeing is the accurate one, and the request to pull the one is to be removed.
It looks like, though, there's a difference in the amount.
Okay, let me grab my laptop 1 second.
Because, though, let me see which one I'm looking at. The second one has an amount of $462,740. The first one has $412,740. So either there was a mistake there, or I'm not sure why there's two different amounts.
So the estimated expenditure that we're requesting to be approved is the $412,000 and $412,740.
Okay, so besides being double, the number was incorrect in the first one.
That's what it looks like.
Okay.
Ms. Vaughn?
All right, so then I'm going to back up, because I was confused when I read this and thought, okay, I don't have to prepare a question because it's pulled. I question this amount for priority marketing. There have been some issues that have been brought up in terms of some of the services that have been provided by priority marketing, including, I don't know that we ever got a really good answer to the amount of time and the purpose and motivation for scanning people's social media accounts. That is a big problem to me. Another problem is that I know our communications department works hard, but we have skilled people in that department, and I have always been an advocate that if we can do things in-house, that's better. That, you know, we're already paying these people in-house. We hire people that know their job, know what, you know, I've seen some excellent work coming out of that department, and here we are spending well over $400,000. And I'm going to quote what Ms. Fisher says on there. She says, I understand that there's marketing and branding, however, we're still not totally or adequately communicating our district story. So I have a problem with that amount, and I'm going to need some hard convincing that we need that moving forward, or I won't be supporting it.
Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so first of all, it's an estimated expenditure, so it's creating a budget. It's not an expenditure itself. Any funds expended are going to have to be approved by the superintendent, I assume, amongst others. And I believe, and I know in the past, I have questioned this amount, and the expenditures in 1 year were projected at $400,000, and they actually spent $72,000. So it's really not a matter of what's going in the budget. It's a matter of how the money is expended. I think what we want is to ensure that the spending is consistent with our plan for communications and doesn't step outside our understanding of how money will be used for stakeholder engagement and communication. So that would be my comment.
Okay, is there any other? Ms. Patrica?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions regarding this? Ms. Gittens?
Yeah, I hate to be a stick in the mud, but I'm just wondering, is the difference in the amounts, was that just an error?
I would suggest that we ignore the one that we're not moving forward and focus on the one that is moving forward. I do have a little bit more information on the requested amount of 412. Dr. Bernier, if you'd like me to share that information.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay, so in the prior year, we requested $250,000, and we encumbered about $213,000 of that. This year, we're seeing a significant increase from the grants department, so several grants were written that indicate that we would design logos for new schools, for schools that are underrepresented or underselected. And so of the estimated expenditures, about $175,000 are specifically for the grants projects.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that number is $211,000 for the grants department. So of the 412, 211 is for grants.
And go ahead, Ms. Gittens.
And that's to do the
So
logos and marketing for a grant?
they develop new logos and branding, as well as advertising and updating marketing materials, producing press releases, and advertising significant school events.
And I know we do have a great staff, but the magnitude of what this company does is a lot greater than all the time that they would have to put into this, because it does, you know, it's for human resources, it's for, I mean, it shares the information on who this is for and what they do, and that would relieve them so that they could do their job here in the district, and then perhaps tell our story better, you know, share that information out from our department within. So I can see the importance of a marketing firm. Ms. Gittens?
I think the superintendent has.
I'm sorry.
I'm fine.
Okay, since this is a renewal, were there other bids put out? Was it put out to bid process?
That would be something to give you an accurate answer. I'd like to take a minute and come back to you with that response. I'd need to research that. But during the bidding process, we send it out. It's opened up to anyone to participate in. It's been a little bit since 2017 that this was bid, so I don't have the information at my fingertips on how many bids were submitted.
Is this, and making sure I understand, I know there are some bids and it's like for 3 years, but after a certain number of years, you come back and renew it kind of automatically. Is that what this is, rather than going out and putting out a full bid process? And I know you can get back to me on that. I'm just a little concerned about that. And I'm concerned about, are there other ways that we can, you know, cut costs more than $211,000 to do, you know, logos? And I understand what the chair was saying, that we don't have the staff to do all of this, and I get that. But I also think we have to be a bit frugal, you know, with our money and deciding, is this the best use of it?
Okay, so more than a half of the money that's being requested is already being provided through the magnet grants, and each of those grants provides a certain percentage that must go to marketing. Because this is very specific marketing to schools, like Ms. Millay mentioned, there's logo creation, there's brochures, so that money that comes from grant funding pays for those services and Priority Marketing is the current approved vendor for the district. This is the last year that they're going up for renewal, and I'm sure Ms. Millay will follow up with you to provide you with the accurate information, but my understanding is that once they go through the last renewal, it would probably go out for bid again.
Okay, may I say one last thing then?
Sure.
To avoid a lot of this conversation, where we presented with something that said the estimated expenditure is $412,740, 211 of that is provided by grants. This is the amount that we're talking about, would have probably made it a little bit more palatable.
I do believe there's a summary in board docs, and then in the board member questions, there is a very comprehensive summary of the dollars that are going to be spent out of those $412,000 and where they're going to go.
Thank you. And Ms. Lancaster, it does actually state on here that this is an estimated expenditure.
Correct.
And that the agenda is specifically for the approval. Other renewal funds will only be expended within the existing resources of the applicable locations. So it is stating that, and yes, the superintendent will execute all related documents. So it will have to go through him and the approval of the board. So it will come back to us for that. It's right here.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think sometimes there may be a misunderstanding that this is all communications, but it's only roughly about 20% of the expense total of the $412,000 that is going to go to communications.
Okay. Dr. Bernier, did you have anything else to put in here before we move to the next one?
No, just to reiterate a couple of things that I think I heard and want to make sure that I heard it clearly from each one of the board members. Board Member Morgan is correct that this is a budget. It is not the actual expenses. As we're all aware, we set aside dollars in our own personal budgets in order to afford certain things. Some days we run within that budget. Other days we don't, depending on what's on sale or what the price of gas may be. So these are projected budgets. Thank you, Irma, for your candor related to the aspect of only about 20% of these dollars are set aside. And I think when we get to the PowerPoint presentation regarding board meeting structures and communication of this staff internally to be prepared for a meeting like this, I want you to remember this particular example as an opportunity for us to be much better prepared as a team to come in and address your questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Bernier, the next one, please.
Yes, ma'am. Also on the consent agenda under academic services, it's G14, approval of the contract with Elk Mountain doing business as Clearview Academy for the 2022-23 school year. The question is the Elk contract for $255,000 for one student in Idaho. What is the evidence that this is the best for the student and the most economic use of resources? Before Ms. Bowen speaks to all of you and questions, let me make sure we clarify something before we move in. This is about an IEP process. This process is driven by an IEP, and for board members, you may be aware that this also has some confidentiality and legality around it. Specifically, we need to be very careful of FERPA moving forward as Ms. Bowen gives you the answers to the questions regarding the IEP process.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So really the evidence here lies in the student's IEP, which again is confidential. The IEP team are the ones that are legally responsible for making the placement decision, and that placement decision is really where is this child's least restrictive environment where they can make progress in light of their individual circumstances. So that team determines this based off of the data, and based off of that data being given by those that know and directly work with the student. And this IEP team determined that the residential placement was this child's least restrictive environment. So the second part of that question lied with economic factors, and the teams can't use economic factors to drive placement decisions or least restrictive environment.
So that's our response to the question. Board members, would you entertain any additional questions or more information that you would like to get?
Thank you. And I know this comes up every year we have this conversation, or I feel like it has. So I appreciate you. And Ms. Fisher is not here. She's the one who had proposed that question. Ladies, are there any other questions regarding this? Ms. Gittens?
So basically, we are governed to a certain extent to just follow certain, check the boxes in situations like these.
Madam President?
Ms. Bowens. Ms. Bowens, did you want to?
Madam President, AP processes, as you're well aware, are legally binding documents. They do define resources, and specifically they provide what is necessary according to the IEP team to deliver the appropriate free and public education to a student. So I would stop short of saying that you're tied, but I believe you have a legal obligation as a school district to follow an IEP, and specifically in this case, it's a relatively sensitive one with some very specific needs that the district cannot do in and of itself.
And the reason I brought that up, the way Ms. Fisher wrote the question, most economic use of resources, we really don't necessarily have control over. We're told we have to do this, we have to provide this, and that's, in my understanding, my son.
I want to be careful about going any further, Board Member Gittens, unless I check with Dr. Bowen.
I'm done.
I want to make sure that if there's any additional information you might be able to provide.
I didn't want any additional information.
Okay,
No.
Sorry, ma'am.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Dr. Bernier?
Also under Academic Services, G21, approval of the memo of understanding between RCMA, Bonita Child Development Center, and the School Board of Lee County. The question is, RMCA, Bonita Child Development Center, MOU. What is the grant? Also, is this the only preschool program in which we have this agreement? Board members, this is a memorandum of understanding. It's not a grant. This is a program that works with our migrant staff and our students at the Bonita Child Development Center. And we have migrant students there who attend their program. The MOU is simply an agreement to solidify that work and is being done for the articulation of the agreement to ensure that we're operating within our boundaries, they're operating within theirs, and they're all operating in the benefit of the students. I have Terry Kennedy, Director of Grants and Charter Schools, here if you have any additional questions.
Oh, and Ms. Fisher is here. Okay, are there any questions here? Hello, Ms. Fisher.
Hi there.
We are on G21, and you had a question regarding that, the RMCA Bonita Child Development Center MOU. And what is the grant, and is this the only preschool program that we have this agreement with? And Dr. Bernier had just shared that it is a MOU working with our migrant children and the understanding of that.
Right. Okay.
And I know you just walked in, so I didn't know if you had anything that you could recall.
Right this minute, I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Dr. Bernier?
The next item is under the consent item, letter K for operations. The actual item is K20. This is the approval of the Phase 2 total project cost for the Fort Myers Technical College FMTC renovation. As you know, when we briefed one-on-one earlier last week, we spoke specifically about FMTC and its need for some additional funding. We specifically looked at the estimate funding when the project was first identified, and again, back to the budget conversation, labor, materials, lots of other things have increased in price, but the questions were very specific. Board members wanted to know and get an explanation for how this renovation aligns with the 5- and 10-year plans for FMTC. So we'll take that one first, and I believe that Frederick Ross is available to answer that question and provide any other information you may have.
Yes, thank you for the question. In the current version of the 5 and 10-year plan. The FMTC expansion is showing for $8,698,000 allotted for fiscal year 21-22, and $4 million allotted for fiscal year 22 and 23, for a total of $12,698,000. There's no no further work noted or any funds allocated. However, the approval of this agenda would increase that need for this particular technical college.
Okay, and Ms. Morgan, that was your question?
That's my question, and I'm just very concerned about how we are proceeding forward with the technical colleges at this point. There have been questions raised in the past about have we done enough work to understand what our needs are from a planning point of view before we commit dollars to projects. It's my belief that there are different opinions about what needs to happen with Fort Myers Technical College long term, and recognizing that there is a need to do something in Lehigh. So the reason for my question really is it premature to move forward unless, as in the case with Bonita Elementary, these are essential renovations in order to create a safe and healthy working environment? But let me try one more way of saying this. I've heard two different plans for Fort Myers Technical College. One is to basically replace it with the Public Services Academy and to move everything out to Lehigh. The other is to keep bare bones in Fort Myers and move things out to Cape Coral. I would like to know, before we start committing millions of dollars, that what we are doing will not interfere with our ability or our flexibility, I guess I want to say, in terms of moving forward with plans for the Fort Myers Technical College.
Ms. Fisher, Ms. Morgan, make sure I understand the question correctly, and I appreciate it, and I'll have staff come forward in just a second. There are a number of things at foot. We have the Cape Coral expansion, which is also being moved forward. We have these renovations to Fort Myers Technical College, which have been in the plan and were expected to be funded. The reason why this is coming before you now is because there's been an increase in funding. And then on the east side of town, east of 75 somewhere, is a plan potentially to build a third technical center, of which $40 million of district money has been set aside, but we're still approximately about that same amount short in terms of being able to build that particular building. And I'm hearing that you'd like to get better information as to how we're integrating all of those things. And I agree with you, but I think, and I will turn it over to, I don't know who's coming.
Right, Mr. Everly.
Yeah.
Todd's going to come up in just a second. I think there's another piece of being a good steward of our buildings right now. So that scope of that project is incredibly important, because we want to make sure that we keep roofs and walls and windows and other things, but there is some expansion to the campus as well. Mr. Everly, are you ready?
Good morning or afternoon. To answer some of this, as we came in from the board twice, the last time we talked about the whole picture and what we are looking at, and I understand, the concerns there is I want to speak for Fort Myers Technical College. Everything that is getting done there, the expansions and everything, we have to do those now because we have some issues with our welding areas and so on like that. They're standing in water. So we went through this. These have to get expanded. We have to clean up these resources, or we can't even have classes there. Part of the discussion is that if the East Technical College is built, and when that is that the current Fort Myers Technical College would move out to that location. We would also keep various programs at the current Fort Myers Technical College. That would be our cafeteria, culinary arts program. We would keep all the nursing programs there, early childhood programs there, could keep some of the welding and blue-collar trades there, and also move the Public Safety Academy to that location. Those expansions, those in the rooms that are currently being redone now and everything, those are interchangeable rooms. They will not affect us whatsoever. I could use them for any of those sites, any of those rooms, and I could put a law enforcement class, correction, EMT, paramedic program, or anything in those rooms. So we strongly suggest that you continue to move on, because we don't know how many years it would be before an East Annex would be up. Where students are there, and they are in dire need. We are turning down seats because we don't have enough room there at this point. That was the projection. That's what we presented to the board at our last time when we did that presentation. But I stand ready for any questions, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Everly. Appreciate it.
Okay, Ms. Gittin, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Kessler.
And that's fine. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. I think it's important for us to understand that this is an essential investment now, but it won't compromise our ability to be flexible in terms of future development of the technical colleges. Thank you.
Perfect. Ms. Gittins?
And I agree with Ms. Morgan. The question was this an expansion or a necessary fix? And you're saying that it's more of a necessary fix.
It's actually both. It is a necessary fix. We have some areas that we cannot no longer, having people, the prior superintendent, Dr. Atkins, walk through with facilities and during rainy season, and we had to shut down our welding area because there was about 2 or 3 inches of water sitting in the area. So we have to upgrade these. Also, the market equipment that is there that we have not upgraded for those programs that we need to get them state certified. So all that still has to happen. No matter what, and then it would be an expansion because those rooms are going to be interchangeable. We may have a new class of something that's coming in 2 years that is driven by the market, that we have to be flexible having these rooms to be interchangeable out to that new demand that's there, goes away after 3 or 4 years, and then here comes something else that is driving the workforce.
And here's the way my brain works with this. I'm looking at 2 different facilities, FMTC that's existing and a potential in the East Zone that a couple of years ago was on the 5-year plan, then got put on the 10-year plan, and I'm not going to that point right now. But you mentioned that you would keep culinary, welding, nursing, and all that at FMTC. And here's where I'm wondering if we need to just look back at the whole big picture of both facilities down the road, because those 3 things are major courses in the East Zone. I mean, they are major career technology events in the East Zone. So here, I'm thinking if we have the most, a large portion of the culinary, a large portion of nursing and welding in the East Zone, and that's kept in FMTC, we're still talking about traveling from our students and all of that.
And let me clarify that if I could. I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, before you answer.
Yes.
Ms. Gittins, I believe that your question is well placed. It's a vital to our long-term planning, and I will certainly let Mr. Everly answer the question, but I think we also have to look at how the conversation started with us this afternoon as to the need for additional planning in this entire area. I've had one meeting with Todd and the 2 other directors. It was about a week ago now. Before we left that meeting, we set the next one, because my process is if you don't have the next meeting on the books, it never happens. It can be 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks before somebody says, hey, and then schedules are already built and there's more discussion. So what I believe Mr. Everly is sharing is a concept of where the plan could go, which still needs a lot more massaging, community engagement, and a lot of other input prior to being finalized. If you have anything more to add.
Just one more. Ms. Giddens, that would be that they're also going to be offered at the other campus. It's not that they're only going to be offered at the Fort Myers. Those same programs will also be offered. That was the part of the concept, because they're growing and we don't have enough seats as it is to what we have. So all three of those campuses would offer those type of programs, and we have to be flexible. If we need more seats in a certain thing, then we have 3 campuses now to offer those type of services.
And that answers a big question, and overall, the fact that your expansion is actually something that's necessary to fix, and that there is not a definitive yet on all of this helps me to understand it better. Thank you.
Ms. Vaughn, please.
Yeah, Mr. Everly, you mentioned that you're turning away students. Who gets priority? Because I know that we have some dual enrolled students, some of our students that are dual enrolled, right,
Yeah.
So is there a priority? Would it go to, if you're limited, would it go to an older student that's already outside of our district, or would it go to a dual enrolled? How does that work?
So, Ms. Vaughn, if I can understand your question correctly, what you're asking is there a prioritization depending on who shows up at the doorstep in terms of who gets enrolled and who may be potentially waitlisted or provided an additional resource? Okay. Mr. Everly?
Well, yeah, and shows up at the doorstep. I'm assuming that those issues are dealt with the counselors.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, it was a bit of an adage to use. Not all students arrived at the doorstep. They meet with counselors.
Okay. Some arrive at the doorstep.
They make well-informed decisions. Some people arrive at the door. Some people find their admissions online and begin the process that way.
Fair enough.
But the reality is, how do you prioritize enrollment?
And when it comes to Fort Myers Tech and Cape Coral Tech, which is different than the Public Service Academy, they take the adult students almost as a first come, first served basis, but we do save spots in every program that we have for dual enrolled students.
Okay, so we've gone down this road once before a while back about the different academies at schools, and I understand that, they may take a veterinary course in their schools and they get a certain certification, but they can get a higher certification at the colleges, right? Is that a fair?
Ms. Vaughn, that is a fair example. For instance, in some of our high schools, students are able to take the level 1 course of firefighting, but still need to come to the Public Service Academy and other places to get their additional industry certifications or their certifications to be fully certified in those areas.
So my point is, and it was months ago when I brought this up, one of the things that we want for our kids is that that they graduate from high school with some skills. If they're not going on to community college, 4-year college, that they have viable skills for the job market. And I think especially in some zones, the particular school that student may be in, they don't offer anything that the student is interested in. And what I had brought up a while back, you were talking about welding and you had to shut down because other schools, some of our academies have welding, do they not? And the thing I had brought up was if some of the kids that want to enroll in dual enrollment, but they can't because there's not a spot for them, are we, and this is moving away a little bit from what we're talking about, but it's still important in terms of those kids getting those skills. So are we doing anything? Have we made a movement, since I brought it up a while back, to see that kids that are closed out of particular courses that will lead to a certification, if maybe even a lower level certification is offered at a different school, that there can, if there are openings, that there can be some movement between the two schools. Like somebody at Lehigh, they want something that's only offered at East. Is that a possibility? Because I think the bottom line for all of us, we're all very concerned with, career and technical and graduating with viable skills. And frankly, there are kids that are closed out of what they are most interested in because they either can't get in for whatever reason to the technical school, or their school doesn't offer what they're most interested in, if that makes sense. Are we making any movement? Has that been discussed?
I know that we're pretty much way off topic about what's going on for this.
But
definitely one.
Just as an opportunity to weigh in, what you're talking about are students being able to graduate both college and career ready. And there's no question that that needs to be a priority.
Right.
Is it a perfect system for over 100,000 students? It is not. It was part of the original conversation that we had a week ago with with Todd and two other directors, to have that conversation. We are also looking at our adult education program as well, and we need to find a means forward by which we have the opportunity and the avenues for children who wish to select those particular opportunities. Is there the possibility of a young man or a young lady who wants to be a welder that right now can't find access to it? I believe that to be the case. But we have to work to try to limit those. We need to work to increase those opportunities to ensure that that's there. But we are long away from the building and the construction work that needs to be done so that we can possibly get there. That some of this expansion will help this particular technical college be more of service to its community.
Okay, and I do realize I was off base, but it's so important to me that anytime I can slip it in there, I'm going to do it.
No, thank you, Ms. Vaughn. And I know that Mr. Everly and his team came in when they did the presentation about the interchangeable rooms, looking at all that, what it can be, what it cannot be, moving forward, and even the possibility of doing that dual enrollment. I know that was a conversation as well from school to tech like they do up north, unless I just drunk that. But I'm pretty sure that I remember that conversation being had. But I do appreciate what you all are doing. So thank you for that.
So the second half of that question, so the second half of that question again for K-20, which was the approval of the Phase 2 technical project cost estimates for Fort Myers Technical College. The second question says, can you please explain funded from sales tax? Before we were told there is a law that we have to do, I'm assuming construction with COPS. Mm-hmm. There was a discussion at a recent workshop in which Ms. Patrica stated there is a law that we have to use COPS, then the sales tax to pay off the COPS. And we're not talking about police officers. I want to get that into the record. Please provide the law and explanation of when it went into effect. And normally building projects are described as a whole, and only the phases are a planning phase and a building phase. Why can't we use that process? Kelly Letcher is coming to the podium. She has some of the information that you've requested.
Yes, I can take the first part of that, and then I'll pass it back to Frederick for the second part. So we were planning on using straight sales tax for the Fort Myers Technical Center because our thoughts were it wasn't a traditional K-12 school, so it would probably not fall within those same guidelines. When this came up, I did call my financial advisor and our outside legal team that handles all of our certificates of participation, just so nobody thinks we're talking about COPS. And they identified that there was nothing in the statute that delineated between a traditional K-12 or a technical center, so it was their opinion that we had to do the certificates of participation as well for this one. So it will be certificates of participation that will be funding it, and I apologize at the time that this was going forward, I had not had that information, so thank you for bringing that up so we could clarify that. And for the statute, it's 1013.64, paren B, 1 through 4, is where in the statute it tells you you have to use the certificates of participation if you're going to exceed the per student cost. And as you all know, I can't say it one time slow. As you all can see with the cost of building right now, it's probably impossible to meet that cost per student station that they have it listed right now. So that's the areas. And the statute took effect in 2019.
So how, if I may,
Ms. Gittens?
how is that change then going to affect, or will it affect going forward on this project?
It will not. It's just the way we fund it. It is still
It's just gonna
be part of. We'll just do it as a part of a COPS versus or certificates of participation versus just straight funding from the sales tax, as we had hoped we could do to try and save a little bit, but we will do a certificates of participation and pay the debt from sales tax and capital millage.
So basically on the answer that you received, there really aren't any buildings or construction that we can do without doing certificates of participation.
Correct. Yes, there was nothing in the statute that gave us either one way or the other. So of course, from our legal standpoint, he highly suggested that we follow the same thing with our traditional schools and do the certificates of participation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No need to apologize.
Thank you.
I think that supports the questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Ms. Patrica, did you have any questions? Just a second, please. Ms. Patrica, did you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gittens?
Well, the last
part of the question, I think that was Mr. Ross, or maybe not.
No,
Mr. Scott.
Mr. Rickenbacker was there.
What in the world?
Dr. Bernier tripped me in the hallway. Just
He said, don't answer that question.
getting old. The question is, we do the phase.
Go ahead, Scott.
We do the phase process, and this particular project for Fort Myers did have a phase one, which created the design and worked with the staff and developed the curriculum and the movement throughout the campus. And now we're coming for a phase two. And I had reported throughout my previous work briefings that the dollars for all the projects are going up. And it was only funded, as you heard earlier, to $12.6 million. And the GMP came in, and we're at just under $18 million. So the reason for coming and bringing this forward to you, I would have anyway with the GMP, but we wanted to alert you that the additional funding was required to make this project a success.
Okay.
Well, thank you for always staying on top of everything. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so, sorry, can't find my paper now. I just lost my paper. Next on the agenda is, when I find my paperwork, I can tell you. Thank you, here it is. The meeting structure, and this would be with, Dr. Carlin will be, and I'm sure Dr. Bernier.
So, Madam Chair, we get started. This is a presentation coming from your new superintendent and his chief of staff. As we've talked offline and in our one-on-ones, there are some needs to be better prepared for business meetings such as these, as well as the main agenda meeting, which happens on Tuesday nights. In order to do so, I need more significant time than currently is planned in our administrators' team schedules. I'm used to an organization that meets every Monday morning in what's referred to as a cabinet meeting. That would include all the chiefs, myself, and the other executive leaders of the school district. One of the most important things that's done in a meeting like that is the review of the board book or the board agenda. We're actually reviewing two at the same time. One is the most recent meeting that's upcoming, and then the one right behind that is also being reviewed at the same time, with an attempt to put that agenda into a final draft 2 weeks prior to a meeting. These conversations should be occurring last week, when we had opportunities to have your questions in advance, be able to get staff enough time to be able to respond to them, and then respond to you in a workshop that could have occurred last Wednesday. So what Dr. Carlin is going to be presenting is a proposal from myself regarding how we could get to that, because a Monday morning is a very long meeting. To be done by 1 o'clock initially, and I know staff is shaking their heads and rolling their eyes, but to be done by 1 p.m. will be a major accomplishment for us in the first several of those. Not only will we review the board book, but we'll also make sure that we're reviewing all the pending items that are coming forward. So a whole conversation that you heard today with Mr. Everly and with Scott and with Frederick and with Kelly, that's a conversation that occurs in cabinet where we can ask each other questions and we can anticipate yours so that we're fully prepared when we come to a briefing, to a public briefing like this. We're fully prepared to handle your questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Carlin, who's going to walk you through a short presentation, which is an attempt to create a way of work or a cadence for your staff to better prepare you for, as board members, for your meetings.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Dr. Bernier, board members, and Mr. Bruno. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Superintendent did a great job opening the conversation, and so really what I'm here to do today is to share the proposal as outlined by Dr. Bernier a moment ago. We have an agenda that we're going to follow. We'll start with our rationale, and I think the superintendent just did a great job explaining the why. We'll talk about our proposal, suggested timeline, what that way of work will look like. We have a couple of graphics to show you what that will look like, and then we'll turn it over to the superintendent for his final comments and your discussion and any questions. So let's jump right into our why. It's always important as a good teacher to make sure we understand why we're bringing anything different forward. And basically what we're trying to accomplish here is to make sure, as the superintendent said, we have some regular routines and processes associated with our cabinet relative to, especially relative to the work in preparation for board meetings. We're working to create that way of work, you know, making sure we've got our calendars, deadlines, and our cadence all working together in preparation for board meetings and workshops. And then it gives us as a cabinet an opportunity just to make sure, as the superintendent said, to get ahead of those questions, to be able to ask each other questions, take a look, see if there's lack of clarity in a particular item, and give us a chance to take care of all of that so when it comes to you at the board, we're ready to go, we're firing on all cylinders. So that's the rationale. So what is our proposal? Again, the superintendent outlined that. We're going to start with Monday meetings with our cabinet, and again, those may be initially lengthy, but I'm quite confident as we go through those, we'll get better and quicker as we go through. The proposal, as he stated, is to move workshops to Wednesdays, so instead of doing our traditional Monday workshop, board briefing, Tuesday, and then action meeting on Tuesday as well, we would take workshops and we would move those to Wednesdays off board meeting weeks. I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. And then the last part of the proposal is really no change to the briefings and the action meetings. Those would remain on Tuesdays, as we typically do. So here's the suggested timeline. As you can see, the month of June would stay status quo. What you would notice is as we move into July, we would have our cabinet meetings each and every Monday, with the exception of July 5th, just due to the holiday. That becomes a Tuesday for us. On Tuesday, July 26th, we would keep our regular briefing and action meeting. And as you look at August 3rd, you would see that's where the first workshop in this new way of work would occur. So it would be that Wednesday, August 3rd, off board member meeting week. And then you see it follows a couple of cabinet meetings, then our briefing, and then the workshop on the off week. Let's take a look at what that could look like. We're going to use August 16th's board meeting as the model here. So starting in July, this is what our work would look like. We would have a series of cabinet meetings. The July 25th cabinet meeting, we would start our reviews. Like Dr. Bernier said, we're always starting early, at least 2 to 3 weeks in advance. So we would start looking at that action meeting agenda, and we'd start poking holes, just like we did today, start asking those questions. What about this? How about this? And really start priming the pump for that agenda on the 16th of August. Then we would have that week to go back and make all of those changes based on our conversation at Cabinet. We land back in Cabinet on Monday, August 1st to review all of those items again. Were those changes made? Are there additional questions? Anything else the superintendent would like to see? And then once we say, okay, we leave that meeting, we're putting this one, this agenda to bed for the 16th, then the superintendent would have his one-on-one meetings with you for the week of August 2nd through 5th. So board meeting one-on-ones would occur. We would review with you the action agenda items. You, of course, have your topics that you always like to talk about with the superintendent, and he will have topics for you as well. But it's important to note that during those one-on-ones, we will be going through agenda items and entertaining any questions or concerns that you have at that time. Now, note that is August 2nd through 5th, and the board meeting is August 16th. So that's going to require all of us to be super organized. So when we land with you, you're able to ask all of your questions, and that still gives us opportunities to secure answers, and we're still well in advance of that August 16th deadline. And then after your one-on-ones, we're all available through the superintendent for additional briefings, questions, and again, we're so far in advance that all of those questions can be answered in a timely manner. So some key deadlines for us, our finalized agenda will be August 5th. As you know, Ms. Schaefer posts that a week in advance, so August 9th would be that posting, and that gives us through the 16th, again, to answer any questions you might have, and then that meeting occurs on the 16th of August. So that gives you one way to look at it. For those of you that are more like me and like the timeline, this kind of lays it out nicely where we start that review way back on July 25th, and then that timeline shows you all the way up to August 16th, the work that is occurring. So kind of two ways to look at it. If you like the chart, there's one. If you like the timeline, there's another. So that is our proposal. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bernier for any additional comments and your questions and discussion.
So my comments will be brief. Just again, it's an opportunity for us to start working ahead for staff. It is going to mean really thinking things through and being proactive. I've already shared with them that if you're thinking about July, you're probably too far behind. You need to be thinking about what needs to be occurring in August in your world. I'm going to be suggesting at this week's cabinet meeting to have some conversations with them about backwards planning their entire year. Start with this month and begin to work backward and pick up those big items that you know are due. I mean, Kelly knows budget is due certain times during the year. And if she knows now and has that scheduled out and is on a big Post-it note or on a planner in her office, she'll know exactly how and when those have to begin to be prepped. We also have been we've also needed to improve our systems related to late items coming to the board. I shared with all of you, we'll have a good cause item on Tuesday night, but it's truly a good cause item versus someone's emergency. This is an attempt for us to get better and not be bringing items at such a late date. I would go back to slide, I believe it was 6, Denise. So this, again, in July, we will already start working in August. The 25th will be working, the 6th will be meeting on the 16th agenda as just a full draft. But within 1 week, that full draft will become a final draft. And when I mean final draft, I don't mean that's final yet. I still have to meet with all of you the week the 2nd through the 5th. Staff is available the 2nd through the 5th, depending on how our one-on-ones go. And then if there are additional briefings and questions that are necessary to be answered, we have that time and until August 9th when Jennifer has to post. So we're buying us the additional time to make sure that you are well informed. And I'll be candid, there's a piece of this for me. It allows me to be better informed, to be up here at a microphone, understanding all of these items at a much deeper level than I was able to get over the weekend while I was attending 6 graduations. Right? It's been a bit of a squeeze to get all of this in to be ready for today and to be ready for Tuesday and Tuesday night. So I'm interested in your discussion and looking forward to sitting back and just listening.
Ms. Gittens.
Okay, I love it. I think that it's a lot more efficient. On slide 4, where you have the proposal of the Wednesday and then the Tuesday. At one point since I have been on the board, we had the workshops and the briefings on the same day, and then just came for an action meeting on the Tuesday. I don't know what your thoughts are as to how the briefings look. I do have a suggestion, and well, a question first of all. Are the briefings going to be at the 350-degree level or further down the line from that, how detailed and time frame? Because if the briefings, if we've had all this prior time to discuss and see it and talk with you about it, are the briefings going to be, an hour and a half long? Or can we do more than one briefing at a time if we have the information prior? And therefore have both on the Wednesday? Just a thought to you and to my fellow board members.
Ms. Morgan?
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood, but to me, the briefings are about things that the superintendent intends to bring forward at some point in time, or are related to the strategic plan, not necessarily have anything to do with the agenda, other than it might be he's briefing us in July about stuff he's planning to bring forward in September. So it really, from a timing point of view, I'm not sure there's any relationship between, I don't understand the relationship between briefings, workshops, and the regular meeting agenda, if that's how you understand it.
Well, no, I was not, may I answer?
Ms. Gittens?
Okay, I was not relating the two. I'm talking about actually two different meetings, and the fact that one of them is just prior to an action meeting on a Tuesday, when we could have those. A workshop is our working meeting. A briefing is basically the staff and the superintendent's working meeting to inform us of something that's going to come in the future. But my basic question is, can we do both of those on a Wednesday and not do it just prior to a Tuesday action meeting? Not that they have anything to do with each other.
She's speaking of days, switching days. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Got that part. Thank you for clarification. Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, I like this. I like the proactivity and thinking about things ahead of time. The one question that I do have, though, is I'm not seeing, we've been doing the agenda review, I think, rather successfully, albeit it's late to do it the day before an action meeting. Is there not going to be an opportunity under this plan to go through, let's say, unresolved questions sitting here in the sunshine and the dais?
Denise, can you go to 6, please? Thank you. There would be no change in what a workshop's, I'm not impacting the workshop's agenda items. I'm simply saying that in order to free up Mondays, in order to get my cabinet to meet regularly, we would need to move the workshops that we're currently involved in, where we're asking questions about agenda items, we would need to move those to a Wednesday meeting. What you agenda within those meetings is completely up to you and your fellow board members.
Yeah, and I was hoping that's what you were going to say. The problem that we used to have was that we had as board members, no real turnaround time to read what was on the action meeting. So this is really going to be a big shift for everybody. I mean, staff as well. I think it's a great shift. I think it's important, but I just want to clarify that we will still have the opportunity, let's say at that Wednesday before the next Tuesday's meeting, to do an agenda review for all of our unresolved questions or questions that we want to discuss or we'd like to discuss as a whole, because another problem that we had in the past was that some board members would get from the discussions, the individual discussions, even though there's an agenda for that, some would get information that others didn't get. And that's a huge problem when you come to the table and somebody says, Well, at our meeting, you said, and it was only brought up at half because that question was asked, if that makes sense. And so I think it's really, really important that we maintain the agenda review item at those Wednesday meetings, and that really assures that all of us understand. And the other thing is, you know, sometimes I don't turn in an item, but as somebody brings up a question that I hadn't thought of and it goes on, or there's a little opportunity for me to sneak in something that I'm feeling strongly about, like I did earlier. I'm bad. Anyway, I just want to make sure that that's retained, so that
Yes.
is going to be retained.
I'm not making any, I will answer that question this way. I am making no change in what you cover within your agendas. I'm simply asking for that Monday meeting to become a Wednesday meeting at this point, so that we can be better prepared for your governance meetings.
Yeah, and I'm happy with all of that, as long as we have the opportunity as a group to sit here and sometimes bounce a few ideas around.
And then if I may, so if someone were to have a question and they would send it to you, that would be sent out to all of us with an answer, so that way we are already thinking about that and knowing the information. Is that correct? Like right now, if we ask a question and then later after the meeting we get a response, comes out to all of us in the update. And if we're working on this ahead of time, when those questions come out, the response can go to us, so we're already aware in advance for that. So when the agenda, on that week that we have the agenda review, we already have all that knowledge as well. It's given us more information. Am I correct in that?
Since you asked me a question, I will respond to it. Yes, the goal here is for the 21st and 25th and the 1st for us to be knee-deep in making sure that while we're moving the ideas of the district forward and we are planning long-term, we are also doing the business of a cabinet, which is getting the agendas for the 16th and the second action meeting in August together and making sure they're as tight as possible, that they're clean, that presentations coming to you have been reviewed by cabinet, that we've asked difficult questions. It's been an interesting experience with us in the cabinet room as your consultant to say, okay, this is a great presentation, what would a board member ask? And that opportunity to then brainstorm and provide the presenter the additional feedback that they need in order to step forward and anticipate some of your questions. Maybe we never get any of them, maybe we get all of them. Maybe you get one that we're not prepared for. But at that point, we've answered the very vast majority of them. So yes, the goal here is that week of August 2nd through August 5, in this particular example, we would be able to provide you a draft copy of the action agenda. I don't think I'm going to go word through it, because our one-on-ones would last forever. Right? But then we'll still do our topics, we'll still do my topics, and then that following Wednesday, the 10th, it's not on this list, but if you can see the target dates, we would feel like we have made all the adjustments necessary to the agenda by 5th, that's the Friday, turn it over to Jen, so she's not doing it on Tuesday night very late, and we put that on the agenda on the 6th, preferably, so we're advertising the right amount of days, on the 9th, and then we could have a workshop on the 10th. You already kind of know what's on the agenda. You're already formulating your questions in your mind. We're already better prepared because you've shared those questions with us, and it gives us time to answer them more in depth and in full than getting your questions. I think we got them, Thursday or Friday of last week, and we were working on them over the weekend and up to about 11:55 this morning. That's not exactly the way our staff should be coming into a meeting where you're going to have difficult questions that we should be able to answer.
Ms. Gittens?
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because saying that we have the questions and one-on-ones, that does not leave anything open for an agenda review on the 9th. If you look at it on the slide 7, with those dates, with the arrows, I guess that's easier for me to see it. So cabinet meets and finalizes the draft. We get the draft on the 1st is what you're saying. Then you meet with us in one-on-ones. Then
You could say to me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
And what you could say to me is, Chris, under consent operations, K-20 and the FMTC program, I've got some questions about that.
Okay, so now that's where the tricky part comes in. So if I say to you at that point, I've got some questions about that, and I don't put them in a written form, we just talk about them, we're missing the piece that the discussion. That's what I'm talking about.
And again, we are not changing anything about the way we currently prepare you. We are
Right.
still doing the same. You gave us questions over the weekend. We've worked on responses. Staff has worked to be prepared for today. Those same questions will be given to all of you the way they always have been. Again, all I'm asking for is a shift of a Monday and Wednesday. That's really all I'm asking. All the other procedures currently will stay in place.
And I think the thing is, then we need to decide then on what days do we need to have those questions in, as opposed to, if it's going to be Wednesday instead of Monday, then we need to have the questions in by when, fellow board members? Do you understand what I'm asking? Is that going to shift? Do we still need them in the Friday before that Wednesday so that you can discuss them? But that's the piece that's foggy to me. Is anybody following what I'm
Yes, so
saying?
you're saying when we receive the agenda and we look over the agenda and then there are questions to be asked or that you may have on that agenda, when are those due to the superintendent so that he can have staff and everyone look at those and get back with an answer?
And
Is that what you just
when-
said?
Yes. And when in the process, those will be answered on the next Wednesday, correct? That's what I'm seeing on here.
No, go ahead, Dr. Lee.
I believe that sounds like the appropriate timeline.
Okay.
And for staff who's present today, since we have reviewed that agenda both on the July 25th and on August 1st, the responses to those questions have been anticipated. We are prepared. We've gone over the items, probably to the point where they don't want to come back to the next Monday morning cabinet. But that'll get us in a position where we are fully prepared standing at the podium at that work session. But yes, we will respond. And while the timelines may look similar, that they'll do on that Thursday or that Friday before the work session, we've done all our work in cabinet. I've had an opportunity to get ahead with all of you, get those questions to staff that may have come out of my briefings with you one-on-one, and we can be working ahead of your written question so that we can be prepared and then spend some time Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as a staff in cabinet preparing for Wednesday's workshop.
Okay,
Remember,
so-
I'll have a cabinet meeting on Monday, and if the questions aren't answered or we're going over them, we'll have a chance to catch the questions that aren't answered and spend some time as a cabinet preparing for Wednesday's workshop as well.
So then on the Wednesday, the 2nd to the 5th, when you meet with us individually, the questions that we ask can still go on agenda review and not saying, well, we talked about that in one-on-one, so that's the end of that. Those questions, to me, are the seeds for the agenda review. Correct?
I would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay.
The only change is when we do it and how better prepared we get for you, so that we can get you the answers to your questions that maybe go deeper and richer into the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then maybe I'm misunderstanding as well. So if Ms. Gittens has her question and she shares that question, before it comes to the agenda review, she's going to have she also will have a better understanding of what that is, because she'll have the information in advance. Or we will have the information in advance, so the conversation's not 5 hours long.
I believe In my past experiences with cabinets on Monday and reviewing agendas, both the upcoming one and the next one, it puts myself and other staff members in a position to be much more knowledgeable as to what is on the agenda. You do not, I'm serious, you do not want to come to a cabinet meeting. We will be going item by item, word by word, reference material by reference material, or you call them attachments. If there's a PowerPoint, we will do the PowerPoint, we will go through it, we will make sure that I'm comfortable with what it says. We did this with some of the presentations moving forward for Tuesday night, for tomorrow as well. We just need to be
Prepared.
more focused on the work of this school district, and the work of this school district gets done on Tuesday nights. So we're not changing how you get your answers. We may change when you get them, but they'll still be well in advance. But can you imagine my cabinet being present, having actually reviewed with their colleagues and being fully prepared, and not only being able to speak to their business agenda, but being able to speak to the academic agenda as well, because they've all heard it multiple times as we've covered it and prepared it for you.
Ms. G?
Okay, so for me, can you just kind of go through a timeline? So, because typically we get the agenda and that's when we review it. It sounds like to me the agenda is going to be worked on Monday, and it normally goes out a week later on Tuesday. But that Wednesday after our actual meeting, we're going to get the information. It's not going to be out as an agenda yet. We're going to know the agenda before it's an agenda.
You will have a draft of the agenda prior to its posting on its official posting on August 9th, and it will be labeled a draft because it's still susceptible to change. It's still susceptible to an item being pulled. It's, all those things can still happen, but it will be a draft of the business meeting coming on the 9th with the public getting the agenda,
the final
agenda on August 9 for the 16th. But we will have done our homework and our questions and our answers and all of these processes prior to that point.
Go ahead, Ms. G.
And I call that our due diligence. We're going to do that prior to the actual agenda, and I think it's wonderful. So thank you very much. And I just want to have clarity, because normally we get the agenda when the public gets the agenda, and that's what you're changing.
Well, that's one of the, yes, so the question, so the answer or the statement was, is that what I'm changing? I'm not changing that per se. I'm getting the staff prepared and myself prepared for these business meetings, and with that, there appears to be an additional advantage to the board members as well.
Thank you.
Perfect. Ms.
Clarity.
That's fine.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Something I love about this is the proactivity and because we don't just work in vertical in the district, the staff also works horizontally, and I think that's going to be a great advantage to all of the staff in the cabinet meetings. And secondly, this may be construed, well, however it's construed. When I was very early on this board, it seemed like, and some of those staff members are no longer here, it seemed like some staff members were kind of annoyed with board member questions. And I think this really cements the idea that if you are prepared and if you are doing things in the right way, and it's going to be in the right way when you all have a chance to go over it several times, there shouldn't be any issue about this board member or that board member always asking hard questions, tough questions, questions that are construed as, well, that board member is just trying to nail us on something. I think that will be eliminated, and I love the focus on everybody being prepared and both that horizontal and vertical staff preparation.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Matrika, did you have any comments?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, please. I wonder, several months ago, the board had an in-depth, lengthy discussion about moving to one action meeting a month. I wonder, and I believe that the vast majority of the board preferred one meeting a month. I wonder how this impacts moving toward that and what the timeline is for that. Please and thank you.
What are your thoughts? I know you're new coming in, so.
It is not, Board Member Patrica, thank you for the question. I don't believe it's within my purview to make a determination for the board how often they will meet. However, I would say as a staff and a superintendent getting to know each other and looking at the 2 meeting schedule per month, when we can demonstrate we can walk, then maybe we can run, is the way I would put it that way. That will, one board meeting a month will create the need for incredible accuracy and advanced planning, because if you miss a July meeting or an August meeting where something is truly time sensitive, you cannot make it up in any way, shape, or form. That would be my only comment.
Thank you.
Thank you. When we discussed it several months ago, we had sent it back to staff for further investigation, research, and we just really never brought it up again. So what I'm hearing you say is you'd like to give this new format a try before we revisit once a month. Is that fair?
I think it would be best for me to get an understanding of my team's capabilities. They are very wonderful, amazing people. I have not met an unprofessional person in the group. They work very hard, including yesterday afternoon, some of them at 4:45 p.m. on a phone call while I was in between graduations. I had no trouble getting hold of them and having a quick meeting in order to be ready for today. So they have the capability. I just think it's best for us to start in this type of structure and work towards that, because there will be some growing pains in this. Just because I've put it on paper and it looks great, there's still the devil's in the execution of it. So we will work very hard to make sure that we get better and better. And I want it to be clear that this is kind of a July change for August meetings. So the ones still coming up in June will still be going through the previous methods.
Thank you. I will calendar it to bring it up again in another 5 or 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. Ms. Gittens?
So I just wanted to clarify, if you were following through, let's say, the month of July is when we're talking about it. So in other words, something that's coming for briefing.
She's on page 5.
Yeah, on page 5. So something that's coming for briefing, we decided, all buildings are going to be blue. Okay, so on the 5th, you would be talking about it in cabinet and going through it, correct? But not to be presented to us until that second meeting in the month. In other words, we'd skip, and you'd have a meeting in between for that briefing. We're not going to talk about the blue buildings until the 26th. Am I getting across okay?
No, briefings are different.
No,
I'm struggling.
What I'm getting at is sometimes we brief for something that's imminent. So with this plan, we're going to brief at least a meeting behind. Ahead, I mean,
Yes.
right. So
Yes, ma'am.
chances are, if this all runs smoothly on the track, we'll brief something at the beginning of the month that will not be brought to us until the second meeting in the month.
I don't know that we'll ever get that far ahead, because we'll be working 2 board meetings at the same time in cabinet. One of them will always have priority over the other. As one is reaching finalization, the other one's coming into a final stage. So I think that I'm kind of referring to it as a 2-week window. By the time we're done with the briefings, Denise, could you go to 6? I love the schedule, but boxes don't work for me. When we have the items, on July 25, we'd be looking at the August 16 meeting like it's in very rare draft form. It's got a few items on it, a few things. Most of the cabinet agenda would be about things to be added to that meeting, so we'll be covering them there. The one we'll be prepping will be the July meeting.
Right.
Right? And then on August 1st, that meeting that was really in draft form really starts to take shape with us being able to deliver a draft of what the agenda looks like to you the week of the 2nd through the 5th. That gives us a whole nother week before the board meeting actually happens. So a 2-week window is about what we can get, but it's not really 2 full weeks because it's still agenda prep, talking with all of you, responding to questions. The goal would be on August 10 when you have your work, if you had your workshop scheduled at that date, that's when we would be fully and completely prepared, and that's about 6 days from your meeting.
And I guess my thing is that sometimes we have briefings about stuff that we're not even going to touch for, a certain amount of time, or we're just being briefed about it because we need to be briefed about it.
Well,
and having it more purposeful briefings that a few weeks down the road you're going to have this come up, and not just, here's a briefing, you need to know about this.
Right. I think that one of the things you're looking at is the draft action agenda on 8/16 would be reviewed with board members. That would be, in a sense, us quickly going through and me highlighting some issues that I think you would want to start to take an early look at. I would not go item by item by item with you in our one-on-one.
Right.
Then we still have the board member topics for the things that are important to all of you, and some of the things that I'm thinking about, as I've tried to do with you, think long-term. Think out a ways. What are we doing? How are we engaging with the community over particular issues? And that would then work towards the workshop being fully prepped.
And also remember too, Ms. Gittens, that a lot of times the briefing are things that we have asked for in our parking lot. Thank you, Ms. G. So there again, that's sometimes why we get things that are forever down the road.
Well, and I agree with that. I guess I just think if we can organize those closer to when they're actually going to come to fruition,
We definitely, I know when Ms. McClung is doing that, she tries to look to see when that is coming up in our workshop or agenda and try to put that on there. But sometimes the members will ask, well, how come we have not seen that yet? And that's the reason why we have not seen it, is because of that reason. Ms. Fisher, you have not had an opportunity.
No, I like to wait till last. So I'm looking at slide 5. And it is entitled Board Meeting Schedule Adjustment. So for June, we're maintaining our current schedule. For July, we have an adjusted schedule. So there'll be 3 cabinet meetings, the 5th, the 11th, the 18th, 4, and the 25th of July. Then on July 26th, we'll have a briefing and action meeting. But in July, we won't have a board workshop.
Yes, you will. You'll see the current schedule at the top of the bullet. The first says current schedule. The July 25th is the workshop, and July 26th is the action and briefing meeting. So what we're adjusting for ourselves is we're adjusting our schedule in order to get prepared for those 2 items.
Okay, so then on July 25th, like today, the day before the briefing and action meeting, we will have our workshop.
You will have to, yes, ma'am. I think that may be a typo in our presentation, Denise.
Looks like it.
Okay.
Did not go to cabinet for review.
Okay. And then August looks a little bit more clear, that there'll be changes then, because we'll have our workshop on the 3rd, then our briefing and action meeting on the 16th, then we'll have another workshop on the 24th, and our briefing and action meeting on the 3rd.
That's correct.
Okay.
Ms. Fisher, if I may, the reason July looks a little atypical is we only have 1 board meeting in that month. That's why it does look a little different, yes.
Right. So we'll still be staying with the current schedule and have the workshop the day before. We won't have a Wednesday workshop in July. Okay.
Are there any other questions?
I say let's try it.
Yeah.
Do we need to take a consensus or anything?
No, we don't need a consensus, do we?
Madam Chair?
Please.
What I've heard, and I'm thankful for it, including Ms. Patrica on the phone, I'm thankful for the opportunity to address items like this with you. I've heard from up and down the dais, left to right, that there is some significant support to move forward with this as a process. So I want to thank you for that. I will begin to work with staff at your direction, provided I'm summarizing this correctly. I'll begin to work with staff to not only look through August, but then work up through board reorganization in November to make sure that we have a schedule set where workshops and other things are planned appropriately at the correct dates. And to your discussion today, which was very helpful to me, to make sure that we create those dates for your questions and the follow-up to staff to ensure your questions are being answered prior to sitting in a workshop like this. So we'll work on all of those things together, and we'll begin that process in July.
Okay, and so I guess Ms. Giovanelli?
Real quick, also, I would just ask and add that can we get those dates on our calendar ASAP, because I know
Yes.
we've scheduled stuff and we have things scheduled, and like I have eye appointments and all kinds of stuff coming up, and it could be that Wednesday for all I know.
We will work with all deliberate speed. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for speaking on this. Okay, the next on the agenda, thank you, Dr. Carlin.
Yes, thank you.
The next is Ms. McClung, and it is a school board self-evaluation. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really important that the calendars get, and that's for Ms. Thomas and Ms. Roman, so thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Bernie here. Attorney Dupree Bruno, nice to be with you this afternoon. The topic for discussion this afternoon is the board self-evaluation. You all received the document last week. I have up the combined self-evaluation. So I'll review each of the 4 areas that were evaluated. We'll look at the combined score. We'll look at the questions that are in each of those areas, and then ask you for comments and any actions that you would like to take going forward.
Thank you.
So we'll begin with the governance standard. The governance combined average was a 2.22. The policy combined average was 2.68. Strategy, 2.33. Stakeholder engagement, 2.52, for a total average of 2.44. So I'm going to switch documents here so that you can see the questions. Again, we'll begin with governance, and here were the questions. And I'll open it now for comments from board members around the governance area.
Okay, who would like to begin? Go ahead, Ms. Gittens.
I just smiled. I didn't say anything. I don't even have it pulled up yet. And I basically, I'll wait for others. I think mine is pretty clear as to my response.
Okay, Ms. McClung, go ahead, Ms. Morgan.
Well,
please.
I think, maybe I misunderstand, but I think really our goal is to tackle some of the issues raised in these comments and say, how are we going to do it differently? I mean, that's how I look at it. And I would say with respect to governance, I think our problem has been the same problem for a long time. We don't have a way of work. We don't follow our own protocols. That leads to misunderstandings. That leads to screeds delivered by, various people. And we have to decide that we're going to work as a team and we're going to agree on what what we are going to talk about, and we're going to stay within the lines or not. I mean, to me, it's that simple. How do we change the nature of the way that we do our work so that we are productive, respectful, and supportive of staff in the schools?
Anyone else? Ms. Gittens?
Well, just based on what Ms. Morgan said, the productive, respectful, and supportive, I think that needs to start with us before we can give that out to staff in the schools. Productive and supportive of everyone that's on the board, and then that is the beginning of working together, and you can't give away what you don't have. You can't give respect to others if we don't have it within.
Ms. Morgan?
So what I'm trying to say is that we spend a lot of time talking about our problems with each other, and we never say, how would you like to have this problem addressed? What isn't happening that makes this work for us? And I will open up a scab, I guess, going back to the issue about lambs. The same questions came up over and over again. I spoke to the superintendent. I said, look, the board doesn't have a document that lays out over a 20-year period of time what has transpired with respect to student enrollment and funding, and the impact that that had on our need to purchase or lease portables, and then what impact has that had on where we have this resultant allocation of portables. That never came forward, so we could never have a real conversation about that issue, because we had one board member talking about one piece, another board member talking about another piece, but we never had the two board members talking about the same continuum, looking at the data about money, resources, student demographics, that sort of thing. That's what I'm talking about. We're not productive when we haven't figured out a way to say to staff and to each other, so-and-so has said this, and there's contention about this issue. How do we ask either staff, or how do we ourselves figure out how to deal with this? Instead, we just come back and we have the same arguments, meeting after meeting after meeting. We have to decide how we're going to work. Are we going to just raise questions and then sit back and hope somebody answers the questions? Or are we going to say, these questions need to be answered, this is what I need to hear from staff? Does the board agree that we need to hear this from staff? Now, maybe, and people may be sitting out there saying, well, Kathleen Morgan talked to the superintendent about this, and she didn't bring it back to us. Well, all I was trying to do was suggest a way that perhaps staff might be able to bring this to the table so that we could have a conversation in which everybody's issues and concerns were addressed. So that's what I want to see.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens, and then I'll come to you, Ms. Chairman.
Okay, just in response to that, one of the things, and I will say, I've spoken to the new superintendent about it, and I spoke to the last two superintendents about it. When we ask for that information and for data, I can go through my file now and give you three different, three forms that look totally different with the same information. We don't have processes like if we say, okay, how many portables are they and where are they? I can put my hands on reports that we were given or I was given that all look different. When I ask for, how many students have this or don't have that, each time it's different. And the response is, we're working on this, and then a few months later, we have a new process. There's nothing like concrete that you say, can you just print out a copy of the portable, or I'm just using that because she said it, the status. And if you print it out today, it's going to look different than it did yesterday, and that it did 6 months ago and a year ago. And it makes it difficult then to compare and contrast. And to answer your question, how do we get better at it or do it better if we can't compare what we did today and what we did yesterday? So a consistency in data, I think, would be a major issue. And also, there have been times, and I remember Ms. Morgan even said once, okay, what is it that you need? You keep talking about ESO. What is it that you need? And I felt that I had been very clear on the needs that I saw, and yet I didn't get 5 or 6 people saying, okay, you know, that's a valid point. Let's work on it. Let's fix it. And it became just that I'm just the mouthpiece that goes on and on about the same thing, because no one saw that it was an issue that we all should gather together and fix this issue. Then we gather together and fix this issue. That's what the team and a group and a board does. So.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you in 1 second, if that's okay. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is that we don't bring our issues forward in the context of the strategic plan, so that, there are financial issues, there are operational issues, there are academic issues, there are all kinds of issues. And if we're not looking at a problem in the context of the strategic plan and what the strategic plan is directing us to do, then we end up with bits and pieces all over the place and nobody able to get to a point where we're having one conversation. I think that's what I see. If we could just say that we're on this path and every question we raise has to come up against this path, and let's see how we solve it in that context. I don't know if I'm making sense. But
Oh, you are. Ms. Giovanelli?
I'll jump in off that. It's defining the deficiency.
Yeah.
And acknowledging it, owning it, taking ownership of it, and identifying it, and then having a plan and giving the directive to the superintendent to carry out the plan. We don't get our plan together.
Exactly.
And so I completely agree with you. And that's I was going to start but you continued, so I was able to keep going. But so I think that we have a hard time taking ownership and acknowledging it. The only way to be able to fix something is to identify it. So I think that is identifying it, having that conversation. What we'd like to see doesn't necessarily mean that's how we're going to, the end result is to fix it, because I think that's up to staff and the superintendent to guide that. But we have to tell them, we can't be, I don't think anybody's psychic up here. And so, we have to tell them that's, the direction has to be clear. And I don't think, sometimes we're not all on the same page, so that direction gets, foggy. So that's what I see. And I think once we figure that out as a board, we can move better as a board. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
So that's exactly it. And I think Ms. Morgan put it aptly when she said, we're not working with the strategic plan. And so I was just looking back at my own comments, which were very brief compared with some, but, we came in with a balance between needs improvement and effective. We have not worked as a team the last 4 years. And so my comment about governance was board members are often working independently, not as a team. Efforts to set goals and to work cohesively are often abandoned. And we have tried numerous times to identify what our way of work was going to be. We each had a part of the strategic plan, which kind of fell by the wayside. And I think that until we all understand that individually and independently we can't do the job, we must work as a team. I mean,
Ms. Morgan?
I'm begging your indulgence, but I think the superintendent can help us. Clearly, the way he has organized the work of the cabinet to respond to concerns that the board has in a timely and productive way for them and for us. You know, at one point, we were going to look at the strategic plan in pieces, and we all knew when those pieces were going to come up. And then any questions people had or concerns people had, if they weren't an emergency, the goal was to address those questions when we talked about that component of the strategic plan. And that got us away from a lot of random questions about what's happening by who and when. So I think listening to us, and you can talk to staff as well, Dr. Bernier, I think he can help us focus and organize our work. This is a board that works well when we have a problem to solve. True. We fall apart when we're all working on a different problem. But when we agree that there is a district problem that needs to be solved, proximity is one. We all agree that that's an issue, but we haven't had an opportunity to tackle it as a governance team recently. That's when we're good. So I'm looking at someone who knows how to manage a business and for guidance. Thank you. And I will really try to be quiet now. Thank you.
That's perfectly fine.
Did you have a comment?
Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, I hadn't planned on saying anything, but I have to jump in since Ms. Morgan used proximity plan as an example. I'm trying to say this diplomatically, believe it or not.
Take a deep breath.
I can't even tell you how many times over the past, I'll say 8 months, I brought the issue of proximity plan to one-on-one meetings, and it just kept being kicked down the road. My question is, as a board member, and a board member who over these past 3.5 years has apparently not developed these really close relationships, close is a rather generic word, these relationships with key staff members that I feel comfortable, and nor should I feel comfortable in going to. There are board members here that get what they want done in a much easier fashion than has ever happened to me in 3.5 years. My request on proximity did not come to fruition, even as I mentioned it over and over. Not that many times from the dais, but yes, as well from the dais. And now stuff is hitting the fan with transportation and lots of other areas. And Dr. Bernier seems to have put proximity from the back burner forward, which I'm all for. But my point is that there's some board members that do not follow the stay in your lane and don't go directly to people and go directly to staff members and have those kinds of relationships. And it may be because Some of them have been on the board longer, or it may be just because some of the board members can preach a good game of stay in your lane, ask the superintendent first, and other people actually follow it. Maybe that's been my mistake on the board, actually following those things. Maybe if I had more influence with certain people, things like the proximity plan wouldn't have gone kicked down the road and finally getting what I consider to be a ridiculous, bogus, insulting timeline a month or so ago. So I am, in my last months here, I am optimistic that we will have a different form of, I'm not trying to insult anybody in the past, but a different form of leadership, a form of leadership that is removed from the we've always done it this way network, or this person has always been in charge. And so, you know, honestly, I feel like I haven't gotten very much done in 3.5 years, and I blame it on myself. But then again, I'm happy to have kept my integrity and not gone through the back rooms, the back channels, etc. So proximity is just one small example. And I mentioned hypocrisy in my comments, the alliances of board members with certain staff members, the alliances with attacks on people that certain board members don't like. And quite frankly, this is why I am done with this job, and I thought I had very little to say about this self-evaluation, and I'm just going to keep my mouth shut after this. I have tried hard, but I have seen the backroom alliances, the lying, the maneuvering, the alliances between board members, with board members and staff members, and hypocrisy. And I'm just hoping that in my last 5 months, some of the things that I wanted to see years ago when I was still teaching in this district come to fruition. The end.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. And we do not want you to keep your mouth shut. We definitely want to hear what you have to say.
I haven't kept my mouth shut, but a lot of good that's done me.
Ms. Patrica? Ms. Patrica?
Yes, I believe that, thank you. I believe that many of my colleagues, I am not one of them, but I believe that many of my colleagues attended a breakout session at the December FSBA FAD conference that instructed board members on how to have student-focused board meetings. And I know that there was some discussion about bringing that speaker in to guide the board so that we could be more student-focused in our discussions. And I'm wondering where we stand on that and whether that's something the board still has an appetite to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And from what I was hearing here today is that we need to, as a board, we need to better identify the issues, to have them be in the contents of the strategic plan, and really be more solution-driven and working as a team. So I think I gave it a higher score because I believe that people are trying. We are trying to work together, and I always have that hope that we will be that team that we need to be. And that's all I have to say on that one. Ms. Gittens?
Okay.
Are we on the same?
We're still on
one?
governance as far as
Just
I know.
number one? Or
And-
just as a whole?
All of governance as a whole, yes.
Thank you.
Governance.
And when you look at the questions, the 1.02 was my very lowest. And it reads, board members treat all members of the governance team with dignity, respect, handling conflict openly and constructively. That was my lowest because in the 3.5 years that I have been here, I have, if at all, very, very seldom have been privy to this particular treatment. And I put everything down that I felt in respect to this. Just to give you an example that just came to mind, if I understand somebody just digging in their heels just because they want to, but on a major issue that has to do with the district and finances and all that, if one person on the board consistently votes 6-1, it would seem to me that the others, if you felt that strongly about it, that others on the board would want to know, well, what is it that can be done to help, resolve that with you? From 2019 to 2022, I voted 6-1 on an item. I'm not going into it, but I'm just saying, and I gave the rationale. I gave the reasons, and no one or very seldom did anyone understand even the data, the statistics, and everything that was brought. And it leads me back to treating all members with dignity and respect. And I hear times someone will be a no on a census vote, and they will be asked, well, what can we do to bring you along? I have not been privy to that in most occasions. So when you read those words, treat all, the word treat jumps off the screen. It is something that each of us individually have to decide and make it up in our mind how we are going to talk to someone, to approach them, how we are going to include them, respect them. It is an individual. To me, that's the one thing on there that is very much an individual decision to decide whether you are going to follow that 1.02 or not. So I don't know if the strategic plan will help with that. We all bring 7 different personalities to the board, and I caution everyone, we are going to have some new people on the board in another few months. And we could be right back at the same place with this being the lowest if there's not a decision made as to how each of us individually, or whoever is still here, will provide dignity and respect for the other people coming in. And that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Gittens. Is there any other comments regarding this? Okay. Oh. I'm sorry, Ms. Morgan.
I was going to ask if Dr. Bernier wanted to respond to Ms. Patrica's comments, since it's been brought up in the past, and he's aware of my interest in doing that.
Dr. Bernier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm aware of an individual that you all saw who there was some feedback during the interview process to me or shortly after being appointed, where there was someone of interest related to potentially working with the board regarding governance training. It's the first, maybe the second time I've heard it being about student-centered, but we are certainly in a position to support the board in any way, shape, or form moving forward. with governance work, with better understanding of each other, better understanding of the strategic plan. The strategic plan is going to need some work when this summer's results come out. Let me put it this way: it may need some work when the summer results come out, because there is a possibility that we will be establishing a differentiated baseline for our student achievement work, and I will need all of you as members to help drive that process. So whatever we can do to help support all of you, and you've added an 8th teammate. He's new. He's sitting right down here at the end of the board with all of you. And that anytime a member of a governance structure changes, it's incredibly important to support that change, so that I can get to know all of you better and me as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
And I'm not wedded to an individual. I'm wedded to the idea of using someone to help us find, our place as a team. So just wanted to put that out there.
If I could jump in one last time on governance, Madam Chair?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I attended a sort of a think tank meeting last week, a week before, in Tampa, and there were a couple superintendents in the room, and each of them said something that was really, in my mind, very impactful. The first said that he leads with results. And if you lead with results, then you're better able to bring the community along with your strategic plan. Show what the results are, and then what we need to do to improve those results. I thought that was impactful. And the other thing was, another superintendent said, the children are waiting. And he repeated that phrase several times, the children are waiting. While we as a governance team sit at the table and discuss each other and the issues that we might have with each other, the children are waiting for us to get to the work that will actually improve their educational outcomes, their education environments, teacher pay, work environments for our teachers, hiring more bus drivers, hiring more support staff, all of the things that have a direct impact on children. So I want you all to know that going forward, that is the question or the statement that I'm going to have in my head as I bring up an item for discussion, or if I am tempted to respond to something, I will think in my head, the children are waiting. The children are waiting. I just wanted to share that because, again, it was a really, those are the two things that came up in that meeting that were very impactful. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. Ms. Giovanelli, I saw that you hit your...
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to jump back in on something that was said a little bit earlier regarding, I think, we're supposed to be governing, we're not supposed to be making friends with staff and fraternizing with staff, and because I think that that's where it's gotten gray. And I know the new superintendent is really adamant about making sure that we go through him and respect those boundaries. And I don't think that we've respected those boundaries in the past. And I'm just going to leave it at that because, I mean, it's quite evident that some board members had more information and they got it directly from staff. I mean, I can just here's a perfect example. We had a staff member that circumvented the prior superintendent, the interim at that time, and came to make corrections to each board member, because she told me she went to every board member and had a conversation about it, and if I ever needed to have have questions or whatever, I just needed to make an appointment with her to have a better understanding, whatever. I found out later that that person had never went through the superintendent. I wasn't on my calendar. I just got called to my office and was given those instructions. So that's a perfect example of being out of our lane. And that wasn't even me being out of my lane at that point. That was staff. Staff should not have circumvented the superintendent. So that is what I think, as a board member, we need to respect those boundaries and make sure that we're not stepping out of our lane, getting information that others are not privy to. I mean, I can name numerous examples of things that's happened in the past that some board members knew and had information that some of us did not have. And I think that's really key to making sure that to be effective, we need to understand our role. And I understand that the prior administration allowed us to have, to go to the staff, but I think we need to it needs to kind of go through the superintendent and to make sure that we're asking the right questions, or that the questions being understood to get the right answer even. So I just really want to be real strong on that, and I don't think it's appropriate for us to be going to lunch with any staff. I think we have to keep that separation because it's a professional working relationship, and we're not up here to be friends with staff. And I've made it a point, and it's nothing against staff. I just think it's just puts you in a situation that you shouldn't be in as this level of governance. And I just wanted to bring that up because I think we lost that somewhere. Some of us have lost that, and I think it's vital because we're not here to be friends. We're here to govern the district with the guidance of the superintendent. So, and to give direction and to stay in our lane at that point. So I'm going to really focus on that with the new superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giovanelli. And Ms. Vaughn.
Well, I'm not sure who that staff member was who said he or she went to every board member. Didn't come to me, probably because they, so if you were told they went to every board member, I rarely have somebody come to me unless it's at following a workshop when I say I'm not supporting something and they want me to support it. That's really the only time I've been lobbied. Otherwise, they know that Vaughn is a fill in the blank. That is not, and that's not to say you're manipulated, but maybe they saw an opportunity. And those of you who know me better, some of you know me better than others, I'm not going to be manipulated, and I'm not going to fall for, you know, I had those things the first week or two, people coming in and, you know, trying to buddy up. And then as soon as it appeared that that wasn't going to happen, that's when the threats started coming in. And yes, there were threats early on.
Real quick.
Okay.
I went straight to the superintendent after that because they were actually disparaging the superintendent and another staff member in his cabinet. So I went straight to them because I was very concerned that I have to make an appointment to talk to staff, and I have to go through the superintendent to follow staff. But this person felt that they didn't need to do that. And they're no longer here, so we'll leave it at that. But that's my point, is they were that comfortable to do that. So obviously they have that, they felt they had that authoritative power to do that. And I took it back to the superintendent and told him what happened. So, because it wasn't appropriate. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
Yes. So, what are we going to do?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do see Ms. Gittens has a hand up, and then I will move to the next step. Thank you.
I just want to clarify something. The comment about, you know, children first, and we put children first and all of that, and remind you of when you're on an airplane and they give you the safety rules, and they say that if there's any turbulence, the first thing you should do is to put your own mask on, because if you can't breathe, you can't help others. And I just keep saying we can't just mask it with saying, oh, we've got to think of kids first, when you're openly leaving out members of the board that is supposed to be working together. I have been ostracized. I have been yelled at, screamed at, told to stay in my lane all the way from top to bottom. So I'm just saying, this governance piece is not about us just singing Kumbaya and children first. We've been trying to do that for 3.5 years. That's not what the issue is. And I think we all know that.
Thank you. So during this discussion, we heard a lot of comments, but really they centered around 2 or 3 big ideas. The first one was treating each other with respect. The second one, and I'm looking at the items that, the standards that you were rating yourselves on. So they centered around the treating all members of the governance team with dignity and respect, the board and superintendent working effectively as a governance team, working to build consensus, and then somewhat around respecting the distinction, not so much between the role of the board and the role of the superintendent, but the role of the board and staff in general. So I heard those 3 big areas. A couple of suggestions that I heard were that that problems need to be discussed more in relationship or context of the strategic plan, which would help focus that conversation. I heard needing to take ownership of your work together as a team, providing clear direction to others, which means coming to consensus among yourselves first in order to be able to provide clear direction to the superintendent and therefore to staff. I believe those were the big areas there. So the next step would be, what are you willing to agree to do in order to make those things happen? So we heard a suggestion about discussing problems in relationship or context to the strategic plan. So is there a general agreement among the group that that is how you would like to go about your problem solving?
And also, Ms. McClung, there was identifying the issues as well, I believe was one of those. So I think that if we can identify the issues collectively and come to an agreement that we do find that it is an issue, then how do we proceed with that? And working together to resolve that or give directions or whatever that looks like. But at first we have to figure out, is it an issue to all of us, or is it an individual issue? If it is an individual issue, then I guess I go back to what Ms. Gittin said. Why is it an issue to the individual person? Get clarity on why they feel that way, and maybe, and I'm just talking, so, I mean, I could be wrong or right, but I'm just trying to get this all wrapped up in my head. So if there is an issue that I might have, and so I need to explain to you why that is an issue to me, so that you all have a better understanding. And if that understanding is, and I know Ms. Gittens, you said you've done that numerous times, and I apologize if I have not, took me this long to understand that. But then, take that to the strategic plan, and how does that fit into what we are doing as a district, and what is our role in doing that? And then keeping the children are waiting. I actually do like that. Making sure that we do have the plan in store on how do we move forward, because we can't keep staying in this one spot. We have to work collectively, whether we don't have to like each other, but we do have to respect each other, and work as a unit, because we are a team. So
I'm hearing the first thing is to identify the issues, and one of the conversation, one part of the conversation earlier was when someone has an issue that others don't feel maybe is quite the same issue, what I'm hearing is a suggestion of getting clarity around that before moving forward. So asking, why is this important to you? Making sure that that is clear, getting consensus among the board as to whether or not the rest agree that that is an issue that needs to be addressed, rather than just, as I heard, a 6-1 vote without an explanation around it.
Okay, Ms. Gittens.
Can I just say one thing to that? There was a time I was trying to explain something, and I presented a 5-slide explanation so that everyone could understand. And you know what happened at the next meeting? There was a discussion of a vote to not let board members do presentations. Nothing about what was presented, but that I should not have done a presentation.
Okay, so, and I know exactly what you're speaking on. So
to
maybe,
me, that's a deeper issue.
So moving forward, what is that commitment to getting consensus around what is the issue? And if one person brings something forward, at least hearing them out, and then the group coming together to decide, yes, we believe this is something we want to pursue, or no, it is not something we want to pursue. How would you go forward with that?
anyone? Because me personally, I think if I have an issue that I believe that I feel very strongly about, I'm going to share it here, but I also would share it with the superintendent because does it make sense? It may make sense to me, but it may not make sense at all, or has nothing to do with what we're working towards as a district as a whole. And he might think that I'm out of my mind bringing it up, but, or say, okay, yes, this is part of where we're at. So how do we work in bringing that back and having that explanation where we all understand?
And I hate to keep going on, but I will say at this point, and I've said this to the superintendent, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm more optimistic than cautious right now. Because I feel that I'm finally at least being heard. And things that I bring up are seen as valid things to look at. I really honestly believe that some factions of this board did not, even though they say it, lip service, they want everybody to succeed or we don't succeed. They have not wanted to see me succeed. Things that I have brought up about children were never, taken any further. From the superintendent on down to staff, oh no, we'll just put that on the side and it'll go away. And it hasn't gone away. The same issues are still there for children.
Okay,
So to avoid that, sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. What I was going to just say, and Ms. Gittens, I'm sure we all hear what you say. There's no possible way that we cannot hear what you're saying. So I guess the issue is we do hear what you're saying. We have heard what you're saying. So how, when it does refer to children and things that we as a board can put our hands on and take care of. But when we are knowing that a lot of times it is, I hate to bring up that word, portables, that would be, nobody wants that to take place. How do we as a board help you or help the superintendent who now has to have staff, and we're trying to build as quickly as possible so we can eliminate that issue and make sure that every child is seated where they need to be seated. And there's multiple things, but that's something that has to come from the operations side and not the board side. So I don't know how we, how do we speak on that to make you feel better about that?
It's not about me feeling better. The issues that I have brought up consistently are about children, about employees. But the issues that I bring up, I have sat here so many times and brought up a suggestion, and there's crickets after I bring it up. And 5 minutes later, someone else on this board will say something very similar, and I hear each of you, oh, Ms. So-and-so, that's a great idea. Oh, Ms. So-and-so, that was a fabulous idea. That was a great idea. Okay, dignity and respect. It was my thought, it was my idea, I brought it up, but crickets. So I'm saying I'm not trying to do operations job. I'm not trying to do the superintendent's job or anybody else's job. My job as I see it is oversight. And if I see something that is not right, I'm going to bring it up. And if no one agrees with me, I will continue to bring it up because I feel deeply and strongly that it affects children. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know, I really don't know how to fix this. I don't know how, because I do believe it's personalities, and I do believe that it's a systemic situation in this district that has, gone on for quite some time. I am optimistic that a new leader that does not have the, looking for the right word there, understanding or whatever that others have had will give us a new perspective, because he comes with a new and different perspective.
Thank you. So I believe, from what I've heard, that there is a common desire to examine issues and make a decision going forward together as a collective group. What I'm hearing in terms of making sure that everyone is heard is that it may require reminding each other of that obligation, that so-and-so has brought forward an issue. We need to decide whether this is something we want to move forward with as a board or not, so that at least everyone feels that they are heard. When you say, I don't believe this can be fixed, the part about the dignity and respect is an individual, internal thing that we can't set rules around other than matters of decorum. However, making that step to say we are committed to make sure that everyone's opinion is heard and that we make a decision as a team as to whether to move forward with that, that is something that can be a step that can be followed through. Is that something that the group wants to have agreement upon, that you will make sure that each person has been listened to and that the group makes a decision as to whether or not to move forward?
Of course,
That's tricky.
That's a no.
That's very tricky to me, because if you want me to shut up about something, then you just get a 4-3 vote and the majority is spoken, and then I'm in trouble because I don't follow what the majority has said. So it's tricky, but I mean, I understand that that is the will of the board.
Ms. Patrica, are you in agreement on that?
I'm not really clear on what it is we're discussing. I don't know that any individual member of our team ever gets credit for anything. I mean, we either help children or we don't as a unit. And whether Ms. Gittens brings up an idea or the superintendent brings up an idea or Ms. Giovanelli brings up an idea, if the board passes it, we've done something good for kids, period. Like, I'm just a little lost on what it is you're asking me to do.
Ms. McClung, please.
Yes, ma'am. I believe the issue was identifying issues. So we're having trouble identifying this one, apparently. So there was a concern that sometimes the board has trouble identifying specifically what issues they want to address and what relationship those issues have to our strategic plan. So the example that was brought up was that a board member will make a suggestion and no one addresses it. So the commitment would be that if someone brings something forward and believes it's an issue, that there would be a discussion around that issue, and then the board would decide, yes, we want to go forward with this, or no, we don't. But it would be very clear that there had been a discussion and that the team was working to identify whether that was an issue to move forward with. Yes, ma'am.
But actually, that's what our parking lot is for. When there is an issue that someone has, or they would like to hear something about, we bring that to that particular. I guess just at the end of the day, can we just all agree to just be respectful to each and every one of us? That's real simple. I mean, to me, simplistic.
ma'am. And you're right, we do bring things to the parking lot, and those topics come forward at least once a month when you have to say, do we want to discuss those further? Do we want to learn more about those? I'm not sure that's exactly the same thing that was being asked with this, though. It was more of a, if I bring something forward and I really believe this is an issue and it's something we're discussing at the table, making sure at least that discussion is heard. And I saw Ms. Giovanelli's hand first.
Yes, and you're absolutely correct. The parking lot is stuff that we're going to brief and a deeper dive and look into. This could be something that comes actually maybe from someone from the public speaker, and we don't talk about it, and and it's something that should be addressed immediately and not kick the can. Identifying it at that point is what we don't do, and we don't talk about it, and then it festers more, and we need to give direction at that point. And I guess it falls upon the chair to help identify and bring it to the board to have a further discussion that could be quick and simple. Yes, the bus 12 didn't make it to bus stop 1 and 5. Why is that? Superintendent, we want you to address and find out why bus 12 didn't make it to 1 and 5, but it went to, 2 and 3 and 4. Just something like that is what I'm saying. That's what my understanding.
Speaking on.
I have a thought.
Yes, ma'am.
If someone brings up a subject or a topic that they feel is very important, that the onus falls on them to show proof of how it relates to children, whether that be with data or whatever. And as long as that litmus test has been proven that this does affect children because then we as a board should have the dignity and respect to look further into that topic with an open mind, because, as Ms. Patrica said, it needs to reflect on children. So as long as we have that piece of it, and that can be discussed, well, how is that affecting children? Well, thank you for asking. There's this and this and this and this.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan?
However, in what you just said, that makes perfect sense. But if you have the data and you have all these points, the superintendent should have already known what that is. So that should have been shared with the superintendent of all of what you are, or us, or myself, whoever that is bringing that forward, so that way he and his staff could share that information and not a board member, because where are we getting the data from to make a presentation? It is a actual assumption on our part that we believe this to be, but unless they're telling us what this information is, then...
That's not right. I mean...
That's my only concern.
No, I don't bring stuff that's just...
I'm not saying you, I'm just saying general. Ms. Vaughn?
I don't doubt, and this is something that I wrote, that I don't doubt that everybody on this board is concerned with the welfare of children. But I want to remind everybody that there's a lot of subjectivity with the decisions and our opinions. For instance, you go back to the masks. It was very contentious. Is this good for children, that we mask and we follow these things? Or is it not good for children? Something else that was less contentious is we've had presentations on the K-8 versus having an elementary school and then a middle school. We listen, and then we make decisions. Of course, this affects children, but are all of the opinions out there the same? No, they're not the same. I mean, you can, on many, many issues, that impact what we do here for our children, you can find data on both sides, and it just boils down to what convinces you, and perhaps doing your own data research, or for me, with my really long background in public schools, I also rely on personal experience. So, we're not dealing with something objective, except possibly when we do budget. It has to balance, it has to, but so many of our other issues, yes, they concern children, but just because I like, let's say, I don't even like any of those. Let's just say, I think we should have primary schools, and then we should have junior highs, or, I could go out and find data on any of that. Does that mean if I get voted down that I'm not looking out for children, or I don't see where anything that we do here, except the arguing about personal matters, I don't think that anything isn't with the children in mind. And I think that is something that all of us, and I address this in the policy area, we have significant shortcomings, but I don't doubt that everybody has the best intention toward children. Now, are there other issues that overwhelm that? Well, I'm not going to get into that, but I believe that there are. But, keep it in mind. It is not a Scantron test.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to summarize quickly and move on to the next area. I believe the discussion that you had today was actually a very good example of listening to everyone's opinions in order to come to a decision about how to move forward. Now, the how to move forward part was best summed up by just saying treating each other with dignity and respect. And I believe everyone understands what that means. It's a matter of, when you get in the heat of the moment, of remembering to stop and take a breath and move forward. I did hear a lot of discussion around making sure that everyone's opinions are heard, and that's a big part of working together as the governance team. Ms. Gittens, I understand that you would like to see some very definite steps on that. If the group decides that you would like to see something much more concrete, we can certainly come back at another time. In the interest of being able to make it through the rest of this evaluation, I'd like to go ahead and move forward with the agreement of the board. Thank you. So we'll go on to item 2, or I'm sorry, standard 2, which is around policy. There were 4 items within that standard. One was already addressed, that belief that students can learn and that learning can improve regardless of the existing circumstances or resources. And the rest are specifically around how you develop and update your policies. Is there any discussion around the policy area?
I personally, because, we do have the contract now, I believe that we are definitely moving forward. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so I agree. I think almost everybody referenced Neola and the fact that Neola will help us get caught up in terms of reviewing our policies and adopting new policies. My concern, what I would like to see, because again, we've gone for 3 years, somebody's going to have to say there's a deadline. And if we don't make the deadline, where is the problem? Is the problem Neola? Is the problem legal? Is the problem staff? And because we can pay all the money in the world to Neola to do this work, but if we can't get to the end and have our policies revised and approved, then we've wasted the money. So I just feel really strongly that we need to ask the board attorney to put forth in writing an agenda and a timeline by which certain things will happen. And I understand they may not happen, but then we need to talk about what is getting in the way of getting the job done. If we don't have targets, and we're not accountable, then we run into the possibility that we continue to drift after 3 years of drift. So that's something that I feel very strongly about. I hope you all are listening.
And I completely agree. And just a perfect example is not having an auditor for almost a year, I think, and not having a timeline. And I know several of us brought it up and talked about it, but we didn't put it out there a timeline. We need to have it by, and address it. The audit committee got kicked down the road, and that took time. But shame on us for not doing better by monitoring that timeline and implementing that sooner, because I think at the end of the day we weren't compliant, and that is on us. So to me that's an example of why we do need a timeline.
Ms. Fisher, thank you, Ms. Juvenile.
And then under policy point 2.04, the board establishes procedures and protocol for its way of work, and Mrs. Morgan has consistently talked about that, and consistently follows the same. And I think that we need to hold our own selves accountable for doing that. I mean, I can't think of another solution to that, because we have we have protocols, and we have established basically our way of work, like when we had the assignments for the strategic plan. But as far as implementing it, we were not really as successful as we could have been. So I think we need to hold ourselves accountable for that.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
No, go
Other
ahead.
comments?
We have to give direction. We just talked about a timeline. We have to follow through with that. We can't talk about it. We have to have action. That's a big thing. I think we talk about so much and we never do anything. Okay. That's what I feel.
We'll have action. We just have to finish making sure everybody has the right to share.
Okay.
So, Ms. Patrica? Thank you, Ms. Giovanelli.
Yes, thank you. I agree with the protocols and the way of work and the frequent inability to follow protocols. These are essentially the rules for our way of work that the board as a whole has agreed to follow, and we don't follow them, and that makes doing our work very difficult. Those are my comments. Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. I support Ms. Morgan's idea of putting forth a timeline with regard to the adoption of policies and setting forth, regular moments when we will come back and determine whether we are on and following that timeline. If not, why not, and how to fix it. Thank you.
Ms. Gittens.
Well, my question is, I'm hearing several people saying we're not following our policies, we're breaking policies, we're breaking rules, and I've been accused of that a lot. But what I would ask is, how do we know what policies and rules, what are we talking about? I mean, I've been told, why can't you just follow the rules? Well, what have I broken? And what is our procedure for finding out you broke such and such and such? Do we have a policy? Because if you don't tell me what it was I did, then I'm probably going to stub my toe on it a few more times. So the question is, don't come to me and accuse me of breaking policy if you don't tell me specifically this is what you did, and we have a discussion. Well, and I feel I did this. How is that breaking that?
Understood. Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so one of the things we've talked about is Robert's rules, and we have talked about sort of trying to follow some of those guidelines with respect to meetings, and everybody has 2 bites at the apple, everybody has a certain amount of time to talk. And we agree to that, and then it just sort of falls by the side because we get involved in a conversation. I mean, maybe we just need to go through Robert's rules and say, okay, these are the rules that we're going to use to operate. We don't have to use them all. And then the board chair and the parliamentarian are going to have to call us out. That's the only way it's going to, if we agree to a way of work and we have people who habitually do not follow it or occasionally don't follow it or don't know, then it's on us to do something about it.
That's on me.
Madam Chair,
I got it. Yes.
No, I believe that the word I used was protocols. I'm not aware of board members violating policies. It's the protocols that we have agreed to as a way of work that aren't followed. I just wanted to provide that clarification. Thank you.
The Neola work, and I did hear a request from a couple of different board members for a timeline around that. So before we go further, is there consensus to ask around that? So I would ask the superintendent what he would like to do around that work, and I believe that the attorney would be involved with that as well.
Well, that would be the attorney and Neola for the policies. So, and I believe that everybody is in agreement of a timeline for that to take place. And do you want consensus on that?
If you were going to ask the superintendent to instruct staff to do that, yes, or if you were going to instruct the board attorney to do that.
Having watched the meetings regarding Neola and following them from a distance, I think there's a couple of things required. Attorney Dupuy-Bruno has been very candid that there's a twofold aspect to the development of policies. One is the legal reading, and then it's up to staff individually to review them and make sure that we're aligning our practices to the policies. So specifically, if we're looking for things on yearbooks and how yearbooks are advised, there is a policy in Neola for that, but legal would have to read it for state law, make sure it's compliance with us, make sure it's compliant with all of you. But then Kathy would need to then additionally assign staff, potentially not only within the central office, but in schools as well, to come and provide feedback. So we can start putting timelines together if that is the wish of the board. Bring them back to you for approval.
Do we have go ahead, Ms. Fun?
Hasn't Mrs. Dupuy-Bruno already submitted some timelines to us?
No.
Yes, she has.
It was, she was going to bring X amount by the next meeting. But there was not really a timeline for extended period.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I may, I have stated this on multiple occasions on the dais. In my conversations with Neola, to completely redo our policies, it is a 6-month to a 1-year process. In addition, Neola will be here in July to begin with the bylaws. All of this is based on how the board moves as well as how staff moves. I've also advised the board that on May 26th, Neola will be here, and I think there's almost like 20 to 30 staff members that will be undergoing the initial training, because this is not just a board or a legal project. This is an entire district project to change these policies. I have also been advising staff in terms of our process and how we're moving forward. So depending on how the superintendent wants to move forward in terms of timelines and guidelines, I'll be more than happy to work with him on that.
Okay, Ms. G.
So, I'm sorry. So I would think Neola has a plan, and I'm sure they're going to share that with us. So that's going to be the, I think for me, a first step or a start. But I mean, perfect example of we didn't have a timeline was on the ethics policy that took well over a year, and that's because it was dragged out by staff, and we were the bad ones here again, that we didn't set a timeline and expectations and make sure they were meeting those goals. So I think this is a way of work that if we start setting the foundation and finally start doing something, we we'll have an end. We'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. We don't have that. We don't even know where the light is at this point. We're trying to find it. So, I mean, that's what I would suggest. And so we give direction. I mean, we're going to have the same issues going to come up with the auditor. And we need to have what's our timeline and expectations from them when they give us their top 10. And we need to make sure that staff is compliant with the timeline and our expectations. And but we have to set that forth. And it's the same with directing our board attorney regarding the Neola timeline and what we expect. And then we can do the same thing with the superintendent and the things that we think that our priorities are. So, I mean,
okay, so we have, so I know we have multiple ones coming up for first reading policies, and then, so with Neola coming in, would you be okay with them coming in and sharing their plan on what that looks like, and then working on the timeline after they have spoken with us? Because we know we already have some that Mr. Pre-Bruno has stated that will be coming forward, and there are some already on there. Ms. Gittens.
Yeah, I don't think we have the knowledge to set any timelines for Mr. Pre-Bruno and for Neola at this point. We have given them the project to make sure it's done, and she has given us some timelines already, and they will be here, and after they come and meet with staff and assess what they have to do, they will give us a timeline. I think the concern is that it will be kicked down the road and not done, but that's not possible right now. It's being done.
Okay. Ms. Morgan?
So I would suggest that we set a deadline of May 26th, 2023, that our policies will be done. That the administration work backwards from May 26, 2023, and lay out how they're going to get these policies done. And then we have to benchmark this. 3 months in, where are we? Yeah. Is there a problem? Is it unrealistic? Because these are the obstacles we are encountering. Then if we need to adjust the deadline, we can adjust the deadline. But if we don't start out with a target, we're just going to do what we've always done.
Well, and Mr. Pre-Bruno, you stated 6 months to 1 year, which that would give a whole year. Mm-hmm. So does that sound doable to you, based on our conversations?
I think based on what my conversations have been with Neola, that sounds doable. I do want to make sure that the superintendent has an opportunity to speak to his staff to make sure everybody's on board with this particular timeline.
$6 months to a year out is more than enough time to begin the process. If we know that once we see and hear the presentation on May 26th, we'll know more about what's actually involved, and then we can work as a cabinet and executive leaders to drive those processes within our individual divisions. I think the other thing that we should do is, once we meet with Neola and understand now that we potentially have a deadline of 1 year from May 26, so May 26, 2023, we would need to come back with a revised timeline for you for your approval, so that not only are you getting, this is when we'll start, this is when we'll end, but here are the check-in points along the way, so that you can know how we're progressing, making sure that we're making the appropriate amount of improvement, and if we're not, why, or if we're ahead of the game, why we're ahead.
That sounds good.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want consensus on that, Cindy, or you just, Ms. McClung?
If you'd like, go right ahead.
Consensus on that? Okay. Ms. Patrica?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McClung. So if you will add that. And Ms. Vaughn, did you?
Thank you.
Are you okay with that?
Ms. Morgan did.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Thank you. I didn't see that. That's why I asked you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other area that was discussed was the board protocols. The board protocols are reviewed in whole at every reorganization meeting in November. However, they are also reviewed in part as pieces of it come forward and you ask to have them reviewed. Those are available. I've sent them out a couple of times. We've actually made a couple of changes this month, so we'll make sure that you have the most recent one. Ms. Schaefer does have that, and I believe it's up on board docs, or it should be soon if it's not up on board docs right now. So that answers the question of where you find your protocol. If you do follow the protocol, it does make it easier when you go to the governance area of number one, of working together with agreed upon protocols. And policy is totally different. When you look at the policy, there are certain things that the state or the board has required, but protocol are those agreed upon procedures that make your work together more comfortable and more and easier to follow. Are there any other questions around the protocol?
Anyone? Ms. Patrica?
No, thank you. If I'm hearing Ms. McClung correctly, we're going to recommit to following them, yes?
If there were any questions around the protocol, and then the action in order to follow those would just be a recommitment of all board members to go back and look at them and to agree to follow those. And then if you have a question about one, that is always something that can be brought forward for discussion.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Any other? Is there a commitment to do that?
Yes. Ms. Giovanelli, is there a commitment to go?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And
Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to the third area, which is strategy. The average rating there was a 2.33. These questions or these items within that standard focused on student outcomes, engaging in continuous improvement, your strategic planning process reflecting best practice, basing decisions based upon that strategic plan. Move it down a little bit so you can see the others. Allocating resources to support the strategic plan goals, and then being an effective steward of taxpayers' dollars. So I'll open discussion for the area of strategy.
Anyone? Ms. Patrica, I'm going to ask you first because I can't see you.
I appreciate that. No, I have no comments at this time.
Thank you. Anyone else on here?
I kind of, sort of, but...
Go ahead, kind of, sort of. Ms. Gittens?
Well, when we're talking about our main job is oversight, and the part about the 3.06, the board is effective and efficient steward of taxpayer dollars, it covers a lot of our ability to ask questions about anything that is financial. And many times we are just, told that we're in the weeds, and that's not our job to do. But it clearly states here it is our job to ask those questions. And I just think we need to, it kind of goes back to the dignity and the respect of someone that has a question about financial issues and accepting them, because it is a part of our job.
Ms. Morgan?
So I look at it a little bit differently. I don't think it's our job to get in the weeds. I think it's our job to make certain that the programs that we are allocating resources to are delivering what we were told they would deliver, that the processes being used by the various departments to make decisions or to make recommendations about the use of resources is a good process, so that what the recommendations coming to us make sense. I mean, I can understand us asking about an expenditure, but I think our obligation is in the budget process. In the budget process, are the recommendations coming with expected outcomes for that use of resources? And then are we holding the superintendent accountable for achieving those particular outcomes? And if we're not achieving those outcomes, where is the breakdown? Is it the program doesn't work in Lee County? Is it that there's no accountability, that the principals aren't being held accountable, or the schools, or the teachers? That, to me, is where our attention needs to be. We need to be paying attention to the budget process, and then we need to be examining the outcome of the budget process to make certain that students are getting what we think they are entitled to based on those recommendations. So that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Bless you.
I think that one of the problems here is that we don't all process information in the same way. I know that I like to look at the small pieces, and to me, look at the small pieces and then see how they have affected the big piece. That's how I process these things. And that's been called, and I have learned to positively despise the phrase, getting in the weeds. If we need little pieces of the puzzle to help us understand the big picture, that's just a different way of processing. And I know, for instance, I used, again, the proximity plan on this, and, you know, we already had the big picture from what Davis Demographics had given us. And I'd say, unfortunately, right now, as a board, all of us should be looking at the little puzzle pieces that are plaguing us, literally plaguing us as a district, that is, to me, the evidence of why we've been too lax in not insisting. I said the board has not followed through on a critically important initiative, the proximity plan for elementary schools, in allowing the superintendent and his staff to place proximity on the back burner after investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in this study. And I went on saying, you know, by the timeline that we were given not too long ago by the prior administration, with, to me, again, kind of a bogus timeline, you know, you see what we have right now without any, let's say, any close way of getting this proximity. If we had a proximity plan in place right now, some of the issues of transportation would not be solved, but would be helped tremendously. If we had it in place right now, it would be helping children. And I find this, again, this is one of my top issues, and I know I've brought it forward, and I've brought it forward in not just from the dais, but as I said, in small group discussions, and pressed on it, but for some reason, and again, maybe I was wrong in the way I was doing it, but here we are in the situation we're in. And I just use this because it's an easy example for everybody to identify with, and it's an easy example of something we passed and we had no timeline, and then after pressing and pressing, where is it, what's happening, we get this timeline putting it way off a couple years in the future, and here we are with transportation issues, with parents. How many parents' phone calls and emails do you get on my child getting fifth choice and we live next door to such and such a school? Yeah, we have not been. This is, for me, 3.03 and 3.06. I don't think it's being a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars, and I don't think it's paying attention to what we have as part of the strategic plan.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Ms. Fisher?
Yes. So we get ongoing information from staff regarding our district strategic plan, continuous improvement, academic services, budget, transportation, and student services. I think that we sometimes don't focus on the big picture, which is part of our oversight. And looking at the standards for strategy, that's where we need to focus. We need to stay focused on the job. And I understand that sometimes small bits of information can provide insight, but we have a big picture that we're responsible for. So I think that keeping the job that we're here to do at the forefront, which is, you know, the academic and emotional, social, and otherwise success of our students, are maintaining a good work environment for our staff. Now, I will say this, the last couple of years have been unusual. So things have not been the same, and we have developed issues like increases in costs in construction and maintenance because of the changes. We have had new laws passed that impact us greatly. So we take responsibility for all of that, but it's been a lot, and there have been a lot of pieces of the puzzle that are out of our control. And so I think we need to stay focused on the job at hand and try to maintain that while being flexible and adapting to the changes that we have to make, because things are changing constantly.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Ms. Gittens?
Under strategy on 3.04, it says the board bases its decisions on the district's vision, student needs, research, and empirical data. Empirical data is qualitative and quantitative data. And if that's what, and I'll just speak for me, I require in order to understand why something is happening in the district, I do not see that as going into the weeds to say, how did we get to this point? Which takes me back, earlier I mentioned how consistency in data has not been one of our strong points. And we get it looking this way, then we get it looking this way. So then there's a question, okay, is this all the same thing? And I brought that up before, but that is an issue. If I'm going to base my decision on empirical data, and the empirical data is different every time I receive it, that is very difficult, and I'm going to have questions.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Thank you. So basically, what I heard was that each of you has different ways of ingesting information and of making sense of the big picture. I didn't hear any real solid need from anyone that you needed to change your way of work, that it seems that you do look at the whole big picture, and it's a matter of finding out more information as you need it. Is that correct?
Ms. Gittens?
Well, and I just want to say in that realm, for example, when Dr. Carlin and her team were able to put the questions that we asked on to board docs. Mm-hmm. That's an example right there. I then don't have to go and ask, well, where was this and when did this happen? And I don't have to ask anybody. I just go to board docs and look up the topic I want to find information about. And I'm not bugging or bothering anybody about it. That is an example of fixing something that was a communications problem that was resolved. It took us a while to get there, but I think everybody sees the benefit of doing it.
Thank you. So I think there is agreement on you do look at the big picture and you do look at the strategic plan in relationship to the discussions that you have. So we're going to move on to the fourth area, stakeholder engagement. The average rating there was 2.52. And you can see the questions there. There were 6 questions that related to how board members interact with stakeholders, how you represent your stakeholders, how you gather information from those stakeholders, and then how you engage in advocacy. So I'll open up for discussion around stakeholder engagement.
Anyone? Morgan, please.
I'll make a comment. I think we're doing better. I think every year we get better in terms of pushing out more information that is more easily digestible by the population that we're intending to communicate with. We have a ways to go. It would be great to see a communications plan. I know that there was one in the works. I guess my concern with respect to stakeholder engagement, and I'll go to my 2 passions. I have other passions too. One is early childhood, the other is career in tech. We're not doing enough to involve the whole community in solving our problems. The early childhood problem, getting kids ready for kindergarten, is not our problem. I mean, it is partly our problem because we are providing services to children, but we can't provide the services to all of the children who need them. We have to form stronger partnerships so that we can do what they're doing with the preferred provider list, make it clear to people what it is that our kids need when they come to school. And then on the other end, same thing with career and tech. Right now we have business advisories for the different academies and for the technical colleges. But if you look at the really good technical colleges in the state, Manatee and Sarasota, they have district level business advisories. They're the ones who are advocating at the state level for the money we need to build these schools so that it's not on us to finance the total cost of the package. And it's not on individual business people to come to us and say, you know, we need to do welding, we need to do this and do that. We need a robust business community group that's interested in supporting, enriching, enlarging, doing whatever we need to do with the technical colleges. So I think, to me, that's what I'm looking for in terms of next steps in stakeholder engagement. So those are my comments.
Okay, there's that good old 4.01 with dignity and respect again, that can be very subjective. You can say to someone, oh yes, I'm respecting you as a stakeholder, I'm giving you time to speak, what else do you want? And it doesn't come across that we are really giving dignity and respect. Those words, I think we as a team need to make sure, since they're very subjective, what does that look like, what does that mean to each of us, and come to a unified conclusion as to what that means. And it may mean having input from stakeholders saying, how do you feel that we show you dignity and respect? The other one, 4.05, the board uses a variety of communication tools to inform stakeholders in district of performance. And you all know that's communication has been one of my big bailiwicks since I've been on the board. I want to give you a quick example. One of the graduations that I did this weekend, and the main speaker, the student, gave his speech in English, and then he turned to the principal and said, and I would now like to do it in Spanish. And when he presented it in English, there were claps and, you know, and all of that. When he presented it in Spanish, it was like the room just erupted. The emotion and the clapping and the cheering. So what am I saying by that? I'm saying to me, it is another fact for school-based decisions. Each one of the graduations I went to was very, very different. And the students are different, and the community and the parents that attend that school are different. And this particular school, that is a major factor. So when I look at how we inform all of our stakeholders about district performance, it has to be different. Not, light years away, and not that we don't put it out in Spanish and in Creole and whatever. But I think the way and the timing and all of that and presenting who we are and what we are, we need that input from the sites themselves. How do you best at this particular school relate to your parents? Do you have to have cookies and coffee and spaghetti in order for them to understand and you sit down? Do you need translators to be there as opposed to having it just translated in written form? And the other school down the street may not have to have that same thing, but we need to look at site-based, community-based. How do we get to the different people?
Thank you, Ms. Gittens. Ms. Giovanelli?
Okay, so I'm going to piggyback off of something that Ms. Morgan mentioned. And this is a deeper conversation for the superintendent and probably us as well. But I, too, we've brought up, we've had great ideas about FMTC and technical schools, but we don't have committees that, business committees that make up this to make sure that we are meeting those needs in the schools. Because, like I brought up the linemen, I've had so much interest in students for linemen, and even like FPNL and LCEC was very interested in partnering to have a lineman, program for our students. Because I mean, let's face it. I mean, we know what hurricanes are like, and we see the linemen coming in. Driving the other opposite direction, but they're coming in and I'm leaving, just for the record. But I mean, the need is there, and it goes back into the real estate community. I have a huge real estate business community that would love to get in and talk to students about what it is to be a realtor, what it is to be a mortgage lender, what it is to be an appraiser, what it is to be an inspector, what all that entails. I would love to see that in the high school level to step up into the FMTC level, and technical college level. Something new that came to my attention, I had a parent call about pilot school. Do you know we do not have anything, even with Bonita, we are not working with Page Field or Collier County to have a plan, and pilot school is very expensive, and we are not looking to. There's grants, and we're told no one's ever contacted either one to have something like that in our schools. I mean, the list is endless for possibilities, and I know personally that they are in dire need of pilots. The Air Force Academy is begging for pilots. The need is there. We need to focus on the need and have a plan, because we don't have a plan. We talk about it. I've been talking about this lineman for 6 years, and we've never put it in to give direction and ask staff to pursue anything with that. So that's an example of engagement. Back to my notes are business communities and our committees, and bringing our community involved in the. I know there's other people like myself that's excited about helping a student go to pilot school and see if that's something they want to pursue, even to greater adventures, regarding that, as well as students don't even understand what the lending process is. So that is something that I would love to see in even our SOS program, honestly. And I have many realtors and people in the community that would love to come and speak to the students. I spoke, actually, real quick, and then I'll stop talking, but I ran into the lady, Sue Ellens, that does the flowers for all our graduations. Do you know that she would love to have a student, and she's interested, I've got to talk to Kaylee and get Kaylee to call her, that she would be interested in the SOS program, and something for the summer, and what that would entail. And I didn't go into too much, but I'm like, we have a lot of students that are very artistic, and that's what, making flowers and so forth are. So, I mean, this just, it's endless, and we are here to make that, and we are failing. If we want to talk about what's, keeping children focused, we're failing them by not getting these opportunities for them. Thank you.
Ooh, there's a lot of talking. I was listening to, I know there's a lot of the different individual schools that have the business advisory committees. So they have those individuals, like Dunbar South, who is very, very strong with the community. So all of these high schools are definitely out there reaching out to the community, and they do have their advisory, the business advisory committee. They're always trying to grow those, of course, because the more that they grow, the better it is for our students, of course. When you spoke about the pilots, which I just had a whole conversation about this weekend about the pilots, and $200, $300 an hour for our students, because once they come out of Bonita, there is no pathway or crossover bridge to that pilot school, because Embry-Riddle is on the other coast. So that might be something that we need to look into. I agree with you on that, because I have had that conversation. And I know we have been speaking, because the more that we can get the community engaged with us, the better we are as a whole, because they do have the talents, they do have the information that we need. They have maybe a better outreach than we can possibly have to bring in those other revenues or whatever that might look for. But a lot of these things too are age. Like I know real estate is you have to be 18, and some of our students are not that, but it still can give them an insight of what they might want to do for the future.
Right.
So
well, just to touch on your example, because I mean, they don't really know what that is. So what, just to even break it down to for their understanding and what that means, and I mean, honestly, if they have the hours, once they're 18, they can go take the exam. It's really not, but I mean, that could be a course that's out of MTC and they are 18 once they're there.
Correct.
So, it's just, there's a lot. Another thing and I'm sorry, I know I'm not asking, but also, dual enrollment. A lot of students are graduating with degrees, and I've talked to, we're not really assisting in that too much. We're not, we're still staying focused on high school, and we're not helping that pathway, for everybody, or the opportunity regarding dual enrollment and what that looks like, because the information wasn't really given to my daughter at the time. So I know that I think we could have a liaison and talking to these schools and making sure we're helping and guiding students that, in the direction of what is best for them at the end of the day. So.
No, I appreciate everybody's comments. Ms. Gittens?
With the indulgence of the board, I would like to, I know that there is a possibility of a program with aviation, and someone talked to me about it recently, to ask the superintendent to speak with, and I'll give you the name of the individual at Bonita High that does, because there is an after program that I'm sure he would like to talk with you about. If the board agrees that he can follow up and have that conversation. And it is pretty significant. It's a great program. I think after the comment about the next steps and all of that with the aviation, sometimes I think we need to make sure we talk to our schools and we've hired a lot of people that are professionals in their particular area, and the second career has been teaching. And so maybe that's where we can tap into some resources as well. Do we know what some of the first careers were with some of these folks? Are there folks out there that could do a club or something after school to give kids a deeper insight into a topic before they get knee-deep in it, in a program, because they have years of experience of having done it. So, that's just a possibility.
Good. Ms. Vaughn.
Okay, focusing on a few of the comments that were just made, and also on 4.03 represents the entire community, and refrains from making decisions based on special interests. I think that's a problem. I think it's a huge problem. First of all, just by the nature of our schools, and I made a comment about the old guard, and that's not just the school system, but all of Lee County, and the haves and the have-nots. We have certain schools that perhaps they're newer schools, or by their locations. For instance, the schools in Lehigh Acres. There is, you look at Fort Myers High School. Okay, it's like been called the iconic school. There are people that, based on that, want it to be a legacy school because of, generations, and all of that is all fine and good, except not every one of our schools is, they're not the haves. They're not the ones that have robust alumni groups, or they're placed in a community that is lower income, or low income, or lower middle class income, that has to leave the community, that there's no strong structure of businesses, of, like larger businesses in the community. I see that as a problem. Mrs. Gittens has been an excellent advocate for Lehigh Acres, and I think that's great. But there's a long way to go, as again, just by virtue of where those schools are physically. The community that supports places like Dunbar. Dunbar has a huge alumni, has very strong alumni roots, and a minority community especially that really supports Dunbar. Again, some of the older schools, you get schools like Estero High School, and the schools in Estero that, let's face it, Estero, and I taught at Estero High School for 8 years, so I know it's a very involved community. They do some wonderful things for their schools, but not every school has that, and so we have to look at the equity. I think we do not do a good job with equity. I think we do not do a good job with special interests. And I'm not talking about only people that come here week after week talking about maths or books or those kinds of things, but I'm talking about special interests in some of our actual towns, our communities, that want specific things, and they have the money, they have the influence. I do think we very much pay attention to the people with more money. I think we pay more attention to the people that have more time. If you look at the ages, of many of the people that come here. Of course, we have a lot of parents, but, you know, we have a lot of people that it's become their mission to speak at the board meetings, and yet they have their narrow area, again, which is fine, but it surely doesn't help our schools that don't have the built-in the built-in scaffolding that some of our more iconic, if you will, for lack of a better word, schools have, or occasionally if a school is particularly has particular needs, sometimes they're kind of adopted by local groups. I think Bonita Elementary, I think, is, when I toured it a couple years ago, I remember that, you know, asking about groups, and what do we do about that? How do we, as a board, I'm not saying quit listening to the haves, but this is the old guard, and I'm going to say it again, Grandpa's Lee County rules. And it rules Lee County as a whole, and it rules this school district. One of the things I want to see is that stranglehold of Grandpa and the old guard. They have their place. But it's a new it's a new century for the past 22 years, and I don't think we do a good job as a school board in representing the county as a whole.
First of all, I think that a lot of this is regarding us, because I know that as far as a board, I think that we do try to represent everyone as a whole. And the individual schools, and Ms. Vaughn, you're absolutely correct, there are some who have a lot more than others. And some are from, you know, back in the days, you know, they've been here forever. But then again, it's the relationships that are built from within those schools and the administrators who have built, because South Fort Myers has not been here that long. They have a billboard. I mean, I've not seen other schools with a billboard. They have a billboard because they created that relationships with the community. So when I see that and I go out and I talk to all the other, you know, the different schools, it's the relationships that they have. Same with like Dunbar, and it's the administration going out there, inviting people, building that relationship for their kids and their students and themselves. And some are better salespeople than others, for sure, and can do that.
If I may, you're absolutely right, and I give kudos to all of those administrators, but I'm talking about us as a board. And I'm talking about us as a board doing that, and also it goes to the issue of placement of personnel to run these schools. If you have a school like Tice or Bonita Springs Elementary, where there's such a huge Hispanic population, and you put in a principal that speaks just English and Hungarian, let's say, that's not really, I mean, you have to look to that, and, you know, that's, well, that would be being in the weeds to say that, but we need to look at all of these things. God, I just used that terrible phrase, the weeds phrase.
No, but
I totally agree with you, Ms. Jordan. But on the other hand, we have, you know, we still have these issues where we have the haves and the have-nots, and we, you know, I know you've been very involved with Franklin Park, but Franklin Park is another one of the old-time schools, and.
But I think as a board,
I think my opinion is we are falling short on representing the whole community, and we pay more attention to the squeaky wheels and the haves, and as my former opponent for school board said, and he lost, he said, I'm paying more attention to the people who actually vote. You know, we got to pay attention to everybody.
Ms. Gittens.
Okay, when I look at 4.03, the board represents the entire community and refrains from making decisions based on special interests. You can look at that several ways, but refrains from making decisions based on special interests has been, that realm of it can be subjective. It has been brought up to me on several occasions that that's what I was doing because I just kept representing one portion. But if we look at the first part, the board represents the entire community. So if there is a part of that entire community that needs more help, needs more assistance, that's what I was talking about earlier. I don't understand why we all would not rally around the need. It's like the example I gave of a family has 3 children, 2 have shoes and food and 1 doesn't. That family would be focused on making sure that that 3rd child has what the other children have. So it was interesting to me that this was one of the lowest in our collective score. That, and it just made me think, how did everybody look at that? You know, did they internalize it or think that one person speaks about one thing too much? Or did they stop and think, maybe there's something in that complaint that keeps coming up that maybe I should look inward and change and try to help, because it does affect children.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I heard clearly that you would like to see the communications plan, and so I will defer to the superintendent in that area.
And
What
Dr.
I heard
Bernier,
was,
he probably is not familiar, that was something that was pre-Dr. Bernier that they were speaking about doing, and that was with another staff member who's not here, so that would need to be shared with him on that.
I believe the team is working on a plan, and again, I will defer to the superintendent for discussion around that area. And if we can hold just 1 minute, I will do a couple because I think he's probably going to speak to both of them. And the other area is around our the business advisory groups. We do have one for every high school with those. In terms of other areas with the tech colleges, we do have a group that we get together ad hoc as needed to talk about that. But I think that the superintendent will want to discuss a little bit about our tech colleges. The other area was that in regard to programs, there are some programs that the state will support and allows to be brought into the tech colleges, and other ones that we do not receive any funding for if we do that. So again, before we go any further with that, Dr. Bernier, do you have some comments?
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, I do. I have a couple of comments. I think most importantly is, before individuals left the district, while I was still here being appointed, I had an opportunity to sit down with that communications plan. I followed up with Irma since being on board over the 3 weeks of being in the consultant role, and that process is moving forward with her and her team. Getting workshops and other things scheduled and knowing where they're going to lie now gives me the ability to strategically lay out some board updates to all of you, where staff would come and present like Denise did today. Doesn't have to be long. They should be less than 10 slides. Let's get the conversation moving. Let's get the feeling of the board about how you want to present. In this particular area, I want to come back to one particular issue to close out, and that would be the governance issue. I think all of these areas are important, but I do believe, as I stated before, as you add another member to your team, rather than thinking of governance training in a silo as just being about governance, I would make the suggestion to the board that as we get the information about our student achievement this summer, and we have to go back and we have to look at our strategic plan, it might be wise, because there will be some issues there, and those issues will be around the core work of this system, which is student achievement and student outcomes, It can take in tech centers. It can take into the programs, the school to work programs, and the other industry certifications you're looking at. It takes in all of that, but it also brings in the operational side of the district at the same time. And to have someone helping us lead that work with dignity and respect, and to help educate us along the way as we interact with those issues and determine some priorities surrounding them moving forward, so that I have a clear plan going into the fall of exactly what you want our school buildings and school leaders to be working on with their students and how this central office can support them. Those are critical components. So just a suggestion, thinking about governance outside of the lens of just sitting down to talk about how to talk to each other.
Yep.
If we can embed that in a process with someone, and I could get that direction, I can work with Cindy to see whether we can identify someone who can do both of those things, work with us on strategic issues and really thinking about identifying what we want to work on moving forward, and at the same time take on some of the governance and some of the other structures you've talked about throughout this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli?
Just on a side note, like, so we get recommendations from our advisory groups, but we don't make a plan with that. And so that's back into the strategic plan for me. I mean, in involving the community. You know, they make suggestions and recommendations, but we do nothing with it. And we don't do it. Like, we hear them, and then that kind of leaves it at that. So I think it's important that we listen and have a plan of action, you know, and because, I mean, when we do nothing, they just assume that nothing, what they did was, what's the point? I've had them come back to me and say, what's the point of us making recommendations if we aren't going to do anything with them? And so I think it's critical that we do.
So then, if I may have, then you would like for discussion, so that way you as the liaison or whomever that liaison is can go back to the advisory committee and let them know what came out of it.
Yeah, I guess that would be helpful. I mean, I think that they would want to hear what the board thought of their ideas. I mean, I think we have to, you know, they have an expectation, and I don't think we're meeting it, because, I mean, they're giving their personal time, and, you know, I think it's critical that we respect it, and with an outcome from the recommendation. You know, and I don't know how we want to talk about how we want to give that outcome, but I think that we just can't let them make these recommendations and they just fall on deaf ears. I mean, we're doing it to each other, but we can't do it to them. We can't do it to each other anymore. We have to take ownership that this is what we're doing wrong and fix it. And the only way is to identify it and fix it. And that goes back to what I say a lot, so I'm sorry.
We do have a process for follow-through with those, and I believe that process document was provided to you a couple of weeks ago, but if not, I'll make sure that you do get that, where depending upon the level of staff work involved in that recommendation, either your board member liaison brings that to the board and it's, you know, a yay or nay, and then if it requires a lot of work, we do ask for you to come to consensus, to ask the board, to ask the superintendent to direct staff to follow through with that. The process from there is that we actually keep everything in a Google document. The information is provided to the liaison and the board advisory chairperson, and then they are asked to, this looks like we lost Ms. Patrica, they are asked to provide that information to the committee.
Perfect.
So it sounds like there may be a breakdown in that, and maybe that's something we need to take a look at.
Yeah. And that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, absolutely, because, I mean, I think they feel, you know, like they're not important, or, you know, and it just, I think even if it comes from even the superintendent, actually, you know, and a reason why we didn't take the recommendation completely, or we only took a portion of it, I think an educated answer, an explanation, I think will speak volumes. Even if it's not the outcome that they wanted to hear, or that we didn't follow that recommendation. Well, here's why, boom, boom, boom. I think that's what they're looking for, in my opinion, but that was what I've received from others.
Thank you.
Chair.
Ms. Gittens?
And I totally agree. The recommendation that was brought from the Finance Committee about insurance came up, and they were not very happy with the answer that was received. And the fact, though, that board members said, oh, that came up when I was on, and that came up when I was on, and in talking to people about it, there's reasons why, but their answer that they were given was, what was it? We signed the contract on the 1st of May. And that was the answer to their, that was it. It was like one-liner. So they were livid. And they said, well, there's a reason that for the last 7 years we brought this up. Yes, we understand that there's an issue, but there is a reason. And it's almost like somewhere along the food chain, someone has decided, oh, they just keep bringing this up, we'll just keep pushing it off. And they are not feeling that at all. And I can understand that because, like you said, no one has actually sat down and said, okay, this is the process, this is what we do. And afterwards, I was speaking to someone that said, it's not, forever. They signed this contract for 2 years, but actually, by next year, the beginning of next year, they start looking at, putting it out again for bid. So even though this contract was just signed, and it just so happened, it just hit on that line of when they asked the question and when it was signed. So to them, it looked like, well, they already signed it, so what? But an explanation could be next year, the end of this year, we're going to look deeper into it. So tell us what it is that you think we can do and include that information in the process.
But as the liaisons, that's what our jobs are, is to bring that information, sit there, listen, hear it, bring it back, and then from there, it's the job to give it to superintendent so they can do, we can't do that work for them. That's just us as the liaison.
I did not. I was the liaison, and I sat and listened to them, and I brought it back.
Yep.
And then I took, I didn't even take back the answer. The answer was given to us in email, and Kelly presented the answer. And then they went on about, why that wasn't acceptable to them. So it wasn't like, I didn't do anything. I did give it over to the superintendent's office, and I know my position as a liaison, and I'm coming back to the board saying that that answer was not sufficient. And if that was going to be the answer, someone should have been assigned to be at that next meeting to explain why this is the answer.
Yeah.
So, and so in my little notes here, we have to have better customer service. I think that's where we're failing, and we even with our own employees, we don't have good customer service, and I think that is one of our deficiencies. And making sure that everyone feels valued. I think that is so important because that's how you lose people, is not identifying and making sure they feel valued. And we know that right down to the janitor in that school, there's value, but we don't show it enough. And so, and there's many ways to do that. And so that goes back to the superintendent, but it's the value to me in better customer service. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I believe we've had a full conversation around that area. And that concludes the 4 areas of your self-evaluation. Thank you for the discussion. I know that we do not have set steps. If you decide at some point that you would like to have a formal action plan, then we'll need to come back to that. But I believe the discussion came to agreement around many of the items that you were concerned about. So thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
So fun, appreciate you. Okay, so next on the agenda is...
Madam Chair, I have a question, please.
Is Ms.
So now that we've finished that and we've gone over it, I'll go back to Ms. Morgan. What next? What do we?
Well, that's what Ms. McClung just stated, that
But I mean,
we will
do
come
we
back
have to
and
do anything
we
else?
would come back and have conversations on next steps, correct? Is that what you just said? Or did I misunderstand what you just said?
You heard that correctly. If you would like to develop a formal plan around that, we would need to do that separately. We talked about some steps today as we went through each section. There was agreement, but there was not a formal plan.
Can you possibly then share that with us before we have another conversation so that we can kind of formulate some
The
ideas?
plan, whatever we just spoke about, would you state it at each level? Could you just send that out? Would you mind doing
Happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Okay, so the next on the agenda is good of the order. Ms. Patrica, do you have anything for the good of the order? Are you back?
I am back, and I want to apologize. The system kicked me out, but I got back into the meeting as quickly as possible. I have nothing for good of the order, and if any of my colleagues do, I'd like to alert you ahead of time that I do have a hard stop at 4 o'clock because I do have a 4 o'clock meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Pre-Bruno?
Just a reminder that in 15 minutes we have to stop.
Yes.
So we're in compliance.
Correct. So we're in compliance? We have to stop because they need to do something with
They need to do something in the back
Oh,
so
okay.
that we can have our
Correct.
TPD and all of that.
Yes, okay. Do with our system. Okay. Ms. Morgan?
I have nothing for good of the order. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vaughn?
I have nothing to share right now.
Thank you. Ms. Fisher?
I have nothing this afternoon, and I just wish everybody a good evening.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens, because I know you were just sitting there ready. Do you have any good of the order? I was going to let you, I was going to say you to last.
I'm not even, I have something to say, but go ahead with it.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Okay, I'll be quick because we have we have less than 15 minutes. But the Learning for Life banquet, talent show and banquets tonight, right?
Yes.
And I will be at that.
5 o'clock.
And, Superintendent, are you invited?
Yes,
Okay,
speaking.
awesome, because that's great, because I didn't know that I was going to ask him that. And then I just wanted to finish my graduation season out and wish all the graduates of 2022 a very wonderful week, and I'm sure they're celebrating for a while. So I just want to congratulate everyone on that, which was. My first day was Cypress, Fort Myers, and South, and then I ended my day yesterday with Gateway Charter in the school in the morning and Buckingham midday, and both of them were actually very unique and wonderful graduations. And just a little bit, I know Fort Myers, no, it's not Fort Myers, yeah, no, or is it South? Oh, it's Fort Myers, excuse me. Fort Myers, they do signing at their graduation, and not every school has a sign language program, I guess. I don't know. And so it was something that he noticed. But also, why I'm even bringing it up is that Gateway Charter School, they must have a huge sign language program, and they actually have they did 3 songs with signing and singing, and that was like awesome. And then prior to, they had a pre-graduation entertainment where they did signing and music up until the graduation started at 10. So I thought that was they had entertainment. So it was, they have a smaller class, so they have a little more time to do that. But I thought that was interesting and unique. Every graduation is different. And I almost wish I could go to every one of them, and because I know they're long and a lot of handshaking. Like I started counting them all up, and I'm like, I shook a lot of hands today. But I mean, it's just I can't explain how different they are and how wonderful they are. So I just want to kudos to all the schools that do it and how they do it and different, because I enjoyed it. Oh, and wait, and then South Fort Myers. they did, I asked, where's my program? I had a little bit count because I like to look at my program. Oh no, they have a QR code. So then I had to do, thank goodness I have my phone, but then I had to, finagle with that and do that. So, we're in the future, so I just thought it was kind of neat. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens.
Anyway, I just wanted to say, and I'm going to mention it more tomorrow when we have more time, but I had a very, very, very good meeting with Mr. Frederick, I almost said Douglas.
I thought you were going to say that too.
No, Mr. Frederick Ross. Sorry about that. And I just want to congratulate him on his first, I think it's 6 months. And I don't know if all of you had the opportunity to meet with him, but he has just done a fabulous job in 6 months. And I'll talk more about it later, but it's a template for a lot of stuff, and I'm sure that you're going to be very happy about some of the things that he's done, and I just, hats off to him and his team. So.
That's it. Good job, Ms. Gittens. Thank you. I just want to say congratulations again to the graduates, and I think Ms. Giovanelli, most of the ones that I was at, they had, all but one had sign language, and I was trying to count the kids. I think it was over like 1,400 hands that I shook. I was trying to do that calculation last night, but it was really a beautiful thing, and I ended off with my grandson graduating, the last name on the list. Yes, oh, wow. It was beautiful. So now today he woke up and he's a graduate, so I'm excited. Ms. Dupree Bruno, do you have anything?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Bernier.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say something. Graduations were absolutely amazing. And while we talk about their differences, I think they're unique from each other. They're very much similar. They follow the same script, they follow the same processes. There's some really amazing traditions here in Lee County that allow all of our children to have a very similar graduation experience, but then there are the unique things to the specific schools that allows them to shine, and I thought that was a really amazing time. One of the graduations that I went to was the alternative ed graduation. I want to just announce a partnership that I knew nothing about at the time. It's a GED partnership that we have. So as our students finish their GEDs and have a chance to now be named high school graduates, FSW is picking them up in a program that gives them one free semester to begin their course of study, and then locks them into a continuing education. I thought it was amazing when the graduates realized inside their scrolls was a QR code to do the work to begin the registration process. There's so many other things, but I do want to highlight two. The highlight from last week was our Mentor Teacher of the Year, Anna Lamada. We had a chance to go out to her elementary school and award her as the Mentor of the Year for teachers. She was in one of her youngest teachers' classrooms. He was a very young man, would be very respectful, but he's doing a fabulous job with those students, and she has been really instrumental in keeping him, speaking to creating a culture where people feel supported and want to stay. One of the questions I asked him before I left his room was, how important has she been? He said, I am staying in the profession because of her. So it's really important we understand the importance of mentoring. And finally, I had a great opportunity to walk into this chamber and call out a teacher in front of all the students currently competing in Battle of the Books, and that was Marilyn Garcia, who was awarded our new Teacher of the Year on Friday as well. So thank you for those opportunities. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes, but those opportunities to be out front and to meet the wonderful people of this community and of our educators has been the highlight from the previous week. Thank you.
And one last thing, I'd also like to just thank the staff too, who was part of the graduations and being there and supporting their schools and the children. So thank you for that. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.